Chapter 277. When Andrew arrived, so did the hidden weapon. Shio! With a sharp sound, a 5-star dart flew from behind them, fiercely hitting the tree trunk diagonally across from them. Han Yunxi subconsciously looked over, but before she could see clearly, the hidden dart that had been stuck in the tree trunk actually bounced back and accurately shot towards Han Yunxi. Long Fei Yi had expected the dart to bounce back, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. He couldn't dodge in time, so he used his other hand to block it for Han Yunxi. The 5-star dart instantly shot into his arm, but it didn't hit the tree. The entire dart actually sank into his flesh. The refracted dart actually had such power. This fighting style was so ruthless. It must be very painful. Han Yunxi's brows furrowed, but Long Fei Yi didn't even frown. He didn't hesitate and directly charged into the forest. However, as soon as he charged in, Andrew shouted, "Yi, come out." All these years, she had secretly snuck into the main peak of Lotus Flower Peak. She had practically walked through the entire mountain, but she didn't dare to enter this forest. This time, if she didn't know Yi was coming, she wouldn't have come. This was a labyrinthine forest. Once they couldn't get out, once they were trapped until the sky turned dark and the insects moved at night, then they could only lose their lives in the forest. Yi, come out immediately. Yi, if you have something to say, come out first. Andrew shouted, but unfortunately, Long Fei Yi didn't turn back. He walked further and further away, his back becoming more and more blurry. Andrew was scared and immediately chased after him. If she was any later, she probably wouldn't be able to find him. As soon as they entered the forest, Andrew didn't use any hidden weapons, and Long Fei Yi also slowed down. As soon as she caught up to them, Andrew firmly grabbed Long Fei Yi's hand. "While we can still distinguish the path, immediately come out with me. Since we're here, we might as well look around." Long Fei Yi indifferently said. "Yi, you're crazy. There's still 6 more hours before the sky turns dark." Andrew said angrily. Although she came here often, she wouldn't take the risk to come here before she found a way to deal with the 100 bugs. Andrew was no longer as tough and cold as before. Instead, she was more worried and anxious. However, Long Fei Yi said, "If Andrew is afraid, you can leave first." Andrew was dumbfounded. Yi had been cold to her for more than 10 years, but he had never spoken to her so impudently. She rushed to Long Fei Yi's side and swept her resentful gaze over Han Yunxi, who had been held in his arms this entire time. She warned sternly, "Fei, your life isn't something you can throw away so easily. Come back with me immediately." Han Yunxi didn't understand what Aunt Ru meant, but she clearly felt Long Fei Yi's hand stiffen for a while. After a long time, Long Fei Yi did not say anything. He protected Han Yunxi and turned around. Only then did Aunt Ru exhale in relief. "Let's go." But it was then that the silent Han Yunxi spoke up. "You're looking for highly corrosive poisonous plants, right?" Aunt Ru ignored her, but Long Fei Yi stopped. "What did you find?" "It's nearby," Han Yunxi was certain. She had been silently searching for it the entire time. It was nearby, and it was highly corrosive. Although she couldn't tell what kind of plant it was, she could detect its toxicity. "Are you sure?" Long Fei Yi rejoiced. Heaven knows how much he wanted to break through the perplexing butterfly illusion. "Nearby." Aunt Ru looked disdainful. Aside from the perfectly straight trees in the surroundings, there were no other poisonous plants. Moreover, these trees were all poisonous birches with no corrosive properties. Han Yunxi was simply spouting nonsense. After Han Yunxi married into the Duke of Qin's estate, Aunt Ru had gone into closed-door cultivation. A few days ago, she'd gone to the Duke of Qin's estate to find out what had happened. Originally, she assumed that Grand Concubine Yi would play that useless piece of trash Han Yunshi to death as soon as she married into the Duke of Qin's estate. She never expected her to replace Grand Concubine Yi and take charge of the Duke of Qin's estate, much less know how to treat poisons and save many lives. When she found out from Chu Shifeng that Yi was planning to ascend Lotus Peak, she immediately ran over to stop him. As soon as she ran into Tang Li, she tied him up and interrogated him. Only then did she find out that Han Yunshi's poison skills were only average and wouldn't be of much help to Fei. She was also entangled with other men, but Yi had actually given her the perplexing butterfly illusion. This type of woman had average skills, but her methods were brilliant. Heaven knows how she'd managed to hook up with Yi. As soon as she arrived, she saw Fei and Han Yunshi fooling around. She almost thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Ever since he was young, when had Yi ever played, laughed, or joked around with anyone? Heaven knows what methods Han Yunshi had used to confuse Yi's eyes. A woman like this would only delay a man's plans. It's nearby. I'll look for it, it won't take too long, Han Yunshi said seriously. Long Fei Yi was right. Since they were already here, there was no reason to go back empty-handed. Aunt Ru's face was stern. If you want to look for it yourself. We don't have time to deal with you. Yi, come with me. Hearing this, Han Yunshi lost her temper. Who wants to look for it? It's not like the perplexing butterfly illusion is mine. Do you think I have nothing better to do? You were the one who said to look for it just then. Who told you to look for it? Aunt Ru retorted. Han Yunshi gave a start. Indeed, no one had told her to look for it. She was probably too angry to think otherwise. Long Fei Yi spoke up. I told her to look for it. Han Yunshi's heart trembled slightly. She glanced at Long Fei Yi from the corner of her eye. Seeing that Long Fei Yi was looking at her, she hurriedly averted her gaze. Aunt Ru was flustered and exclaimed angrily, there's no way it's nearby. Yi, do you believe Aunt Ru or her? Long Fei Yi avoided Aunt Ru's angry gaze. Han Yunshi, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and look for it. Without a doubt, he had made his choice. Aunt Ru was greatly disappointed. She had taught him for more than 10 years, but she couldn't compare to a woman he had known for less than a year. Aunt Ru took a deep breath and calmed down. Han Yunshi, I'll give you the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. She had to calm down and try to leave this forest as soon as possible. Unexpectedly, Han Yunshi said, no need, I've already found it. Aunt Ru frowned. She didn't believe Han Yunshi, but she also didn't believe that Han Yunshi would dare to brag so much. Aunt Ru chose to remain silent. Where is it? Long Fei Yi didn't even need to think before believing her. Han Yunshi glanced over, and their eyes met before they both looked away. Han Yunshi didn't speak, but walked to the right. Long Fei Yi and Aunt Ru hastened to catch up. Han Yunshi stopped in front of a large tree, her gaze resting on its trunk. Where is it? This was the first time Aunt Ru had been so impatient. Split open the trunk and take a look, Han Yunshi said seriously. This is a poison birch tree, Aunt Ru reminded her immediately. After Fei's mother passed away, she was the most knowledgeable about poisons in the Tang clan. I know. Long Fei Yi, hurry and split it open. Be careful, Han Yunshi said as she backed up a few steps. At this moment, Lil Thing, who had been curled up in the medical pouch, poked its head out. As soon as it saw Long Fei Yi point his sword at the trunk, it shrank back in fear. How did this swordsman know there was a secret passage hidden in the trunk? Didn't he know that it led to the underground poison storehouse? The storehouse was divided into above ground and underground. The above ground contained poisonous plants, while the underground contained poisonous water. Once it was destroyed, the storehouse would be finished. Lil Thing wanted to crawl out and bite that man's hand so he could never hold a sword again. But it was still afraid. It didn't know why, but it was instinctively afraid of him. I'll draw a circle to curse him. While Lil Thing was drawing circles on the ground, Long Fei had already done as Han Yunxi said and split open the tree trunk with his sword. Only then did they realize that the trunk was empty, and a sour scent assaulted their nostrils. Long Fei Yi was about to look into the hole when Aunt Ru called out to stop him. Yi, be careful of poison. But Han Yunxi only said, this smell isn't poisonous, don't worry. Aunt Ru was embarrassed and didn't know what to say. She just coughed a few times. Although they hadn't seen any corrosive poisonous plants, Han Yunxi didn't seem to be lying. Although she didn't like Yi's trust in Han Yunxi, Aunt Ru wasn't an unreasonable person, nor was she a simple-minded girl. She quickly realized that she had been deceived by Tang Li. Han Yunxi had only used her eyes to look and didn't use any other methods to find the trunk. She was really capable. It looked like she had to re-evaluate Han Yunxi. Long Fei Yi quickly discovered the secret in the trunk. There's a secret passage leading to the underground. It's very deep. Aunt Ru and Han Yunxi came over at the same time. Just as Aunt Ru was about to speak, Han Yunxi said first, let's go down. Aunt Ru was just about to say the same thing. She had searched for so many years. Now that she had a clue, how could she not go down? She had already thrown the matter of the 100 insects parade to the back of her mind. Perhaps the thing she wanted would be under this tree hole. She looked at Han Yunxi, a trace of admiration flashing through her eyes. She didn't expect that this girl would have the guts to agree with her and also have the guts to take such a risk. Very good, it looked like she wasn't a paper tiger anymore. Aunt Ru was the first to jump into the cave, followed by Han Yunxi. She was quite excited. Although that sour smell wasn't poisonous, she felt that something was wrong just by smelling it. Perhaps it wasn't poisonous because it wasn't concentrated enough. Perhaps they could find clues to decipher the perplexing butterfly illusion under the tree hole. Han Yunxi said very seriously, I'll walk in front later. Everyone be careful. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi didn't come in immediately. He looked at Han Yunxi and asked, Han Yunxi, are you sure you want to go down with this prince? She had already jumped in, so what did he mean by that? She had said before that she wouldn't come and help anymore. She had even returned the perplexing butterfly illusion to him. However, she had come, helped, and was so excited. Han Yunxi's ears reddened. She was both embarrassed and angry. She hesitated, but just as she was about to jump out, Long Fei Yi jumped into the tree hole first. He said indifferently, I'll walk in front with you. Han Yunxi didn't have the chance to refuse, because Long Fei Yi took her hand. Aunt Ru walked behind them. As she looked at their tightly interlocked fingers, a complicated look flashed through her eyes. She didn't understand why Tang Li would lie and slander this woman. Chapter 278. Long Fei Yi held Han Yunxi's hand and walked in front while Aunt Ru followed behind. The path down the tree trunk grew steeper and steeper until it turned into a vertical passage. Long Fei Yi jumped down with Han Yunxi in his arms. Aunt Ru followed closely behind, but they ended up in an underground stone room. Night pearls illuminated the surroundings, but the stone room was empty. There was only a door leading to an unknown place, and the sour smell in the air was much stronger than it had been above. Long Fei Yi landed with Han Yunxi in his arms, but he didn't let go of her. Instead, he took her hand again. Han Yunxi's gaze drifted to the hand he was holding. She moved slightly, trying to break free, but Long Fei Yi only tightened his grip. Han Yunxi furrowed her brows and looked at him, but he didn't look at her. She could only see the side of his face. The lines on his face seemed to have been carved, handsome and cold, stern and domineering. Han Yunxi stared at him for a while before trying to break free again. She didn't know if Long Fei Yi knew she was watching, but he was cold and domineering. He ignored her and didn't let go of her hand. In the end, Han Yunxi was defeated. Too lazy to argue, she let him be. Aunt Ruth saw all of this. She decided to go back and properly interrogate Tang Li and Han Yunxi about what was going on between them. Yi was someone who wanted to accomplish great things. Even if Han Yunxi was of great use to him, he couldn't fall in love with her. Love would only make things worse. Yi's Mufei had long warned him that even if it was the person closest to him, as long as it was for the sake of his cause, he had to kill them if necessary and abandon them if necessary. To build a palace here, this must be an important place for the poison sect, Aunt Ru said seriously. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi ignored her and walked towards the only door in the stone room. Aunt Ru looked at their backs and opened her mouth, but she didn't know what to say. She could only follow. After exiting the stone room, there was a stone path. The stone path was very long, and at the end of the path, there would be a turn. The sour smell in the air gradually became stronger. Rather than calling this place an underground secret palace, it would be better to call it a tomb. An hour later, they found at the end of the road was not a turn, but a stone door. Inside the door, the light of a luminous pearl was even brighter than the outside. At this moment, Han Yunxi stopped in her tracks. There's poisonous gas inside. It's purple miasma. Aunt Ru was curious. The place where they stood was still some distance away from the stone door, so she did not notice. How did Han Yunxi know? If Aunt Ru hadn't seen Han Yunxi's abilities, she definitely wouldn't have believed it. But now, she believed it. This is the only way, Long Fei Yi spoke up. His meaning was clear, they had to go. Aunt Ru hastily explained. Purple miasma was one of the weakest types of miasma. Its toxicity was so weak that it was almost negligible. It would only cause the victim to feel dizzy. There was no antidote for this poison, nor did it need one. Once inhaled, the victim would be fine as long as they rested in a place with clean air. Based on our strength, this doesn't count as poison, Aunt Ru said confidently. After understanding the situation, Long Fei Yi prepared to enter without another word. Han Yunxi silently followed, but stopped at the door. Wait. She took out 3 small packets of medicinal herbs from her medical pouch and gave one each to Long Fei Yi and Aunt Ru. She kept one for herself. This counts as an antidote. Just put it in your mouth and chew it. Aunt Ru opened it and immediately recognized that it was a fresh mint leaf. She asked suspiciously, "There's an antidote for purple miasma?" Ever since her sister passed away, she devoted herself to the study of poisons. She read through all of her sister's books. Miasma is the most common poison, but she has never heard of an antidote. Poisons without an antidote and those that don't need an antidote are the most terrifying poisons. The best way to deal with them is not to force yourself, but to prevent them. Mint isn't an antidote, but it can prevent purple miasma from entering the human respiratory system. Otherwise, once the concentration of purple miasma exceeds the threshold, it will become an incurable poison. Han Yunxi explained as she tossed the mint leaf into her mouth. She took the opportunity to break free from Long Fei Yi's grip and walked towards the stone door. Looking at her confident and carefree figure, Long Fei Yi's mind wandered. Aunt Ru couldn't help but whisper, "Yi, who did she learn her poison skills from?" "I've never heard of the Han family knowing poison skills." "An expert," Long Fei Yi answered without thinking. "An expert?" Aunt Ru was puzzled, "Who?" The expert doesn't allow me to say. Long Fei popped the leaf into his mouth and chewed it before immediately following after Han Yunxi, leaving Andrew at a loss. An expert. There are only a few experts in the poison world today. Who is it? Does Yi-er have to hide it from her? As they approached the stone door, Andrew sensed that there was not only purple miasma behind the door, but it was also very thick. She secretly rejoiced that Han Yunxi had been careful. Otherwise, they would have fainted the moment they entered such a thick miasma. Han Yunxi was about to enter when Long Fei grabbed her hand again and firmly entwined his fingers with hers. This time, Han Yunxi abruptly turned back to look at him, her eyes clear and bright as she stared at him with open and honest eyes. She just stared at him without saying a word. This was clearly a question, or perhaps she was giving him a chance to explain. However, Long Fei glanced at Aunt Ru from the corner of his eye. Not only did he not answer Han Yunxi, he even avoided her gaze. Han Yunxi frowned and suddenly flung her hand away. This time, Long Fei was caught off guard and was flung away by her. Long Fei, you can hold hands in some situations, but you can't simply interlock your fingers. Don't you understand the meaning of interlocking fingers? Han Yunxi flung away Long Fei's hand and strode through the stone door. Long Fei was stunned on the spot. It was Aunt Ru who followed in, but the moment she entered, she exclaimed, Yi-er. Long Fei hurriedly entered and saw a large stone room behind the stone door. Under the dual effects of the luminous pearl and purple miasma, the entire stone room was dyed purple. In the hazy purple mist, they saw 5 open stone doors facing them, each leading to different unknown places. They had walked all the way here, but such a situation had occurred. Andrew tried all 5 stone doors and found that the acidic smell in the air was the same in all 5 directions. She subconsciously turned back to look at Han Yunxi. At this moment, Han Yunxi's brows were tightly knitted as she scanned the 5 stone doors. However, the detoxification system reminded her that there was no poison in any of them. 5 choices were placed in front of them. What should they do? Should we split up? Andrew asked. No. Long Fei immediately rejected. This was the most time-saving method, but it was also the most dangerous. Han Yunxi, what do you think? Long Fei asked. They'd been walking for 2 hours now before he finally spoke. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't even look at him. She only shook her head. I don't know. I can't sense any poison. She was still cautious. The acidic smell in the air was getting thicker, but she couldn't detect any poison. However, this didn't mean that there wasn't any corrosive poison in the air. It only meant that she couldn't detect it. If the acidic smell here was related to the perplexing butterfly illusion, then the detoxification system that couldn't detect the perplexing butterfly illusion might not be able to detect the poison here either. She silently told herself not to be distracted by anything. She had to maintain a high level of vigilance. The moment she showed signs of being poisoned, she had to retreat immediately. 6 paths. 5 in front and 1 behind. The front path led to unknown lands and unknown dangers. The back path led back to where they'd come from. In the end, they had to make a choice. Han Yunxi and Aunt Ru couldn't give them any suggestions, so Long Fei didn't delay. He was about to head for the first door when a woman and 2 men suddenly appeared. The 2 men were in a sorry state, as if they'd been burned by fire. Their clothes were tattered and their hair was disheveled. Although the woman was protected, she was also in a mess. Even so, Han Yunxi recognized the trio at a glance. Their features were deep and imposing, their stature tall and powerful. This was Western Zhou's crown prince, Duanmu Bei. He had slanted eyebrows that reached his temples and a heroic air about him. This was Western Zhou's famous general, Chu Tianyin. Han Yunshi didn't recognize him, but she knew who he was from the expensive ebony bow on his back. As for the woman, she had a pretty face and a cold expression. She too carried a bow on her back, giving off a lofty air. This should be Chu Tiannin's younger sister, the Chu clan's famous icy beauty, Chu Qingge. Duanmu Bei and Chu Tiannin both gave a start at the sight of Han Yunshi's group. For a moment, they exchanged glances, each with their own thoughts. The atmosphere grew tense. It wasn't strange to see Duanmu Yao and Crown Prince Yi in Medical City. This Crown Prince was famous for doting on his little sister and often accompanied her by her side. But seeing him in a place like this was worth thinking about. How did he know about this place? What was he doing here? It wasn't very likely that they knew about the perplexing butterfly illusion. Han Yunshi not only examined Duanmu Bei, but Chu Tiannin as well. The Chu clan was a famous clan in Western Zhou. It was common knowledge throughout Cloud Realm continent that the Chu clan had produced great generals. Chu Tiannin was one of the Chu clan's newest great generals and was even more famous than Tianning's Mu Qingwu. His archery skills were said to be the best in Cloud Realm continent. On the battlefield, a single bow from him could kill a line of 10 soldiers. Why had someone like him come here with Duanmu Bei? Han Yunshi was still wondering when Long Fei Yi suddenly grabbed her hand again. Not only that, but he pulled her behind him as if to protect her. After all, Western Zhou and Tianning were allied by marriage, but he didn't have a good relationship with Duanmu Bei. Add that to the fact that Duanmu Yao's recent marriage had caused Duanmu Bei to hold a grudge against him. Moreover, this was the poison sect's forbidden underground palace. Both sides were thieves, so nothing that happened here would spread. There was no Duke of Qin or Crown Prince Yi here, only enemies. Currently, Duanmu Bei and Chu Tiannin were also examining Han Yunshi's group. Compared to Chu Tiannin's low-key demeanor, Duanmu Bei was much more arrogant. He glanced at Aunt Ru but didn't take it to heart. Instead, he murmured to Chu Tiannin, Han Yunshi doesn't know martial arts, so our chances of victory are high. You and I will keep Long Fei Yi occupied while Qingge takes 2 of the girls to test the remaining 4 doors. Chapter 279. Duanmu Bei's group had been here for a long time, but they had no choice but to try them one by one. Who knew that they'd lose so badly at the very first door? They walked for an entire day without seeing anything until a huge fire suddenly erupted at the end of the path. Fortunately, they'd escaped in time, or else the 2 of them would have been burned to ashes long ago. Of the 5 doors, only one held the thing they wanted. The others all had fatal traps. Duanmu Bei was a very arrogant and high-profile person, but he was always on guard against Long Fei Yi. This time, it wasn't because he was arrogant, but because Chu Tiannin and Chu Qingge were present. The Chu clan's archery skills had always been used on the battlefield, but rarely in private fights. Still, they weren't inferior in any way. At least, as Duanmu Bei saw it, Chu Tiannin's archery skills were enough to resist Long Fei Yi's sword skills. Duanmu Bei was very anxious, but the Chu siblings weren't. Chu Qingge's cold gaze was fixed on Han Yunshi, a shrewd glint in her eyes. Aren't you curious as to why they're here? Chu Tiannin's voice was low and magnetic. They must be here for that thing as well. Let's subdue Long Fei Yi first and get the thing. It won't be too late to ask the rest after that. If this was in the past, Duanmu Bei would have drawn his sword as soon as he saw Han Yunshi humiliating Duanmu Yao in Medical City. What kind of thing could make him put aside Yao Yao, who he loves the most, for a while? It was the poison sect's treasury. Duanmu Bei had no understanding of Medical City or poisons. In recent years, he'd made few connections with outside powers because he was busy fighting for the throne. This time, he'd come to chase after Duanmu Yao. He'd been the first to find out that Duanmu Yao was in cahoots with the Duke of Kong. For the sake of coaxing her back, he'd come to Medical City himself. Unexpectedly, Chu Tianyin and Chu Qingge sought him out of their own accord on his first day in Medical City. They told him that the poison sect's forbidden grounds contained a huge pile of treasures left behind by the poison sect in the past. He had been fighting for the throne with his brothers for many years and had spent a lot of money. He had long been embarrassed. Moreover, once he ascended the throne, he would need a large sum of money to buy the hearts of the soldiers. Cooperating with Chu Tianyin had long been his dream, not to mention cooperating to make money. He didn't think twice before following the Chu siblings here. As he saw it, Long Fei's group had to be here for the treasury as well. Today, even if he had to join forces with the Chu siblings to kill Long Fei, he still had to obtain that treasury. Duanmu Bei's hand was already on his sword, ready to attack. However, Chu Tianyin said in a low voice, "At most, we can only tie with them. Han Yunxi doesn't know martial arts, and that woman doesn't look like she's trained." Chapter 280. Chu Qingge couldn't wait for Han Yunxi to agree. As soon as she heard Han Yunxi say, "All right," she immediately asked, "Which of the 4 remaining doors will you choose?" Her anxious expression made it seem like she was afraid that Han Yunxi would change her mind. Han Yunxi didn't, but said openly, "You choose first." "No need." Chu Qingge was very proud. Han Yunxi was too lazy to argue with her. She shrugged her shoulders and asked, "Will you choose the second door or not?" "I'll choose the third." Chu Qingge replied immediately. Actually, the choice of door wasn't the most important thing to her. The most important thing was that Han Yunxi would be at a disadvantage in a duel like this. Of the 4 doors, only one held the thing they wanted. The other 3 were all filled with traps like the first one and led to a dead end. She refused to believe that Han Yunxi would be lucky enough to pick the right door. Even if she did, she'd still run into traps, perhaps the most terrifying of them all. No matter what, it was impossible for her to escape unscathed. She didn't know martial arts, so she was slower than others when it came to escaping. She might even lose her life here. Of course, Chu Qingge wasn't completely certain that she'd come out unscathed, but she'd rather be injured than risk Han Yunxi's life. At the very least, Han Yunxi's injuries would be worse than hers. Chu Qingge strode to the third door and added coldly, "The time limit is 1 hour. If you can't get out in time, you lose. The one with the most serious injuries loses." "All right." Han Yunxi agreed easily. She tried to break free of Long Fei's grip, but Long Fei held on tightly, his expression frightening. This woman who's acting on her own is simply seeking death. "Let go," Han Yunxi said in a low voice. Long Fei wouldn't let go. He was already planning to go back on his word. Rather than risk Han Yunxi's life, he'd rather go all out and fight. But Han Yunxi looked up and said, "Let go, and don't worry, all right? Trust me just this once. Let go and be at ease." Han Yunxi, so you actually knew that this prince had a heart. It's good that you know. Since he had the heart, how could he let it go? Long Fei still did not let go. Han Yunxi was helpless. Long Fei, when have I ever lied to you? When have I ever disappointed you? Indeed, she did so well every time. Whether it was her own matters or his, she handled them perfectly. There was basically nothing to nitpick about. Even when she was in great danger, she could turn misfortune into fortune. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, everyone was waiting, but Long Fei did not care. In the end, what made him let go was the confidence and determination in Han Yunxi's eyes. He lowered his voice and unconsciously softened it. "Be careful. If there's no other way, come out. This prince is right at the door." Just like when they left the inn, he had also told her that he would always be in Medical City. He thought that this woman must have discovered something again, or perhaps she had already found the right passage. Every time, she was always full of surprises. Aunt Rue wanted to persuade him as well, but when she saw Long Fei-yi let go, she didn't say anything. When she saw Han Yunxi and Long Fei-yi staring at each other, Chu Qingge couldn't help but urge, Han Yunxi, you're not going back on your word because you're afraid of losing, are you? Han Yunxi strode to the second door and ignored Chu Qingge to look at Chu Tianyin. The time limit is 1 hour. The one with the most serious injuries will lose, and the loser will leave. Chu Qingge was such a cold and lofty person that no one had ever ignored her. Anger filled her heart as a calculating look flashed past her eyes. Han Yunxi, do you dare to raise the stakes? They'd already agreed that the loser would leave. What else did she want? She'd already asked if she dared, so what else could Han Yunxi say? Her expression was calm. There's no harm in saying it. Seeing Han Yunxi's calm demeanor, Chu Qingge smiled coldly in her heart. This woman won't shed tears until she sees the coffin. It'll be too late for regrets once she's gone through the door. Han Yunxi, if you lose, leave your medical pouch behind before you leave. Do you dare? This was the stake that Chu Qingge had raised. Although she was angry, she hadn't lost her reason. Han Yunxi's poison skills were so mysterious that her medical pouch had to be hiding some secrets. Even if it wasn't, it had to have plenty of good stuff. A medical pouch was as important to a doctor as a sword was to a swordsman. Han Yunxi was too surprised. This was the first time someone had set their sights on her medical pouch. She'd found this pouch among Lady Tianxin's dowry and everything inside belonged to her. Isn't Chu Qingge a little too picky? Seeing Han Yunxi hesitate, Chu Qingge knew she'd made the right choice. Cold, she gave her a disdainful look. Han Yunxi, you don't dare. But Han Yunxi was quick to agree. No problem. Then what if you lose? Before Chu Qingge could reply, she added, how about you leave all your clothes behind? Cough, cough. Everyone present, including Long Fei-yi, was stunned by her words. Chu Tianyin started coughing violently. He wasn't faking it, but really was choking. What did it mean to go overboard? Han Yunxi was the one who'd done it. She'd embarrassed the other party before the outcome was even decided, leaving them with no way to retort. Chu Qingge's face alternated between red and white. It was as if she'd stripped naked in front of the crowd. She was both embarrassed and angry. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore and raged, Han Yunxi, you're shameless. So you don't dare. Han Yunxi was truly shameless. She smiled as she retorted. Her question left Chu Qingge at a loss for words. She couldn't answer, but she couldn't either. Han Yunxi straightened out the straps of her medical pouch and crossed her arms. She didn't speak, but enjoyed the sight of Chu Qingge's expression. Han Yunxi's attitude made it impossible for the icy beauty to stay cold. She huffed and said, that's it. Han Yunxi, just wait to lose. It's best if you leave half your life behind. Chu Qingge was about to explode from anger, but Han Yunxi didn't lose her temper. I'll do my best. Chu Tianyin began to count down the time. Han Yunxi immediately went through the second door, while Chu Qingge didn't want to be outdone. She stepped into the third. Although the secret underground palace was filled with night-luminescent pearls, the passageway behind the door was very, very deep. Moreover, they walked quickly, so it wasn't long before they lost sight of their figures. Long Fei-yi and Aunt Rue waited at the second door, while Duanmu Bei and Chu Tianyin waited at the third. Neither of them spoke, leaving the room very quiet. Han Yunxi, what did she discover? Aunt Rue couldn't help asking. If Long Fei-yi had let her go, then there had to be a reason. Long Fei Yi had no idea. He only glanced at Aunt Ru without replying. Still, his glance reassured Aunt Ru. As long as Long Fei Yi knows that woman's background, then there shouldn't be any problems. An hour of waiting was a long time. Long Fei Yi's attention was completely focused on the passageway, but Aunt Ru was looking at Duanmu Bei and Chu Tianyin with interest. She couldn't figure out how these two had found this place. After all, she'd searched for so many years without success. Could it be that Chu Qingge had found them? Duanmu Bei had said just then that she knew poisons. But why did the children of Western Zhou's Chu clan study poisons? Did they come here for the secret of the perplexing butterfly illusion as well? But there's no way they'd know about its existence. Right now, Duanmu Bei's attention was focused on the passageway as well, while Chu Tianyin's mind was elsewhere. He couldn't figure out how Long Fei Yi and the rest had found this place. Had Han Yunxi brought them here? And who was that woman by Long Fei Yi's side? Why had they come here? While the people outside were filled with doubts, the two women inside were in completely different moods. Chu Qingge was on full alert as soon as she entered the passageway. Her nerves were stretched taut as she walked step by step deeper into the passageway, constantly on guard for any signs of movement around her. She was truly advancing step by step. Not only did she want to win, but she wanted to win beautifully. Long Fei Yi, when we met 5 years ago in Wild Goose City, do you still remember me standing by Duanmu Yao's side? Everyone was cheering for my archery skills, but you were the only one who turned a blind eye. Today, I won't allow you to ignore me any longer. Unfortunately, its master ran away too quickly. Just as the little thing ran over, the group of spiders immediately scattered. One by one, the huge black spiders fled in all directions as if they were running for their lives. In a short while, they were all gone. Awoo! Lil Thing stared at the empty secret passage and plopped down on the ground. It really wanted to cry. I've been a vegetarian for so many days, but I haven't eaten meat yet. Han Yunxi ran and ran until she realized that Lil Thing wasn't following her. She stopped, realizing that there was no need for her to run at all. If Lil Thing couldn't even deal with a swarm of spiders, how could it survive in the poison sect? She quickly turned back, only to see that the swarm of black spiders had disappeared without a trace. It was as if they'd never appeared in the first place. Lil Thing was sitting in the middle of the secret passage, its head drooping in disappointment. Han Yunxi stared and stared. The more she looked, the more she felt that something wasn't right. There was no way the little beast hadn't noticed the swarm of spiders approaching, so it had been sniffing just now. All right, Han Yunxi instantly understood. She walked forward and pulled Lil Thing over, then stood in place and let it sniff the perplexing butterfly illusion. Lil Thing was listless because it hadn't eaten any meat, so it allowed Han Yunxi to grab it. Its little nose was stuck in the opening of the perplexing butterfly illusion bottle as it refused to budge. Han Yunxi couldn't help but burst into laughter at the sight. She glanced at the hourglass she carried with her and decided not to make things difficult for Lil Thing. She stuffed it back into her medical pouch and fed it some bone poison from her detox system. Time was almost up, so she had to leave. An hour was both a long and short time. If it wasn't for Lil Thing, Han Yunxi would have been surrounded by the spiders long ago. Even if she hadn't been surrounded, it would have taken her 2 to 4 hours to escape. Currently, Chu Qingge had just emerged from the secret passage. It was unclear what she'd encountered, but her white robes were stained with blood. Her left hand was hugging her right arm, indicating that she'd suffered serious injuries. Qingge, what's wrong? Chu Tianyin panicked as he rushed over to support her. But Chu Qingge only said, it's just a minor injury, nothing to worry about. So speaking, she took a deep breath and forced herself to walk step by step out of the stone door and out of the secret passage. Her luck had been terrible to run into the white tiger's sneak attack. Fortunately, she'd reacted quickly enough, or else her arm would have been gone by now. Her injuries were indeed serious, but she still pretended that nothing was wrong. As soon as she stepped out, she looked towards the stone door and asked coldly, "Han Yunxi hasn't come out yet?" If this girl was already injured to this extent, would Han Yunxi be in the same state? After a while, Chu Qingge couldn't wait any longer. She endured the pain and grinned. It can't be that Han Yunxi won't be able to come out, right? Hee, it's about time. As this crown prince sees it, things point to disaster, Duanmu Bei smiled coldly. Neither Long Fei nor Aunt Ruth paid her any attention, but Long Fei's eyes flickered with worry. Yet right at this moment, a figure emerged from the depths of the secret passage. It grew clearer and clearer until it was none other than Han Yunxi. Long Fei Yi was so close to rushing over, but he didn't. He only stood in place and watched. Chu Qingge and Duanmu Bei couldn't believe it and hurried over. But Long Fei Yi took a step forward and blocked the passage with his tall frame. Duanmu Bei was about to speak when Chu Qingge stopped him. Full of confidence, she said in a low voice, "There's no rush. Wait and see." Han Yunxi had seen Long Fei Yi from a distance. For some reason, his tall figure blocking the passage gave her an indescribable sense of loneliness. She walked in front of him, but he still didn't move aside. His tall frame gave off an oppressive feeling, but also a sense of security. He lowered his head to look at her, his dark eyes as deep as the sea. Han Yunxi wanted him to move aside, but when she saw his eyes, she couldn't bring herself to speak. Instead, she lowered her head. The two of them fell silent. Long Fei Yi studied her silently, inspecting every inch of her body to make sure she wasn't injured. Finally, even Chu Qingge couldn't take it anymore. "Cold?" she asked, "Duke of Qin, what do you mean by this?" Duanmu Bei laughed coldly at Chu Qingge's words. "Long Fei Yi, what, are you afraid to admit your loss?" Long Fei Yi didn't move, allowing them to speak as they pleased. He slowly examined her as if he wanted to inspect every inch of her body. Chu Qingge, who'd been left out to dry, couldn't take it anymore. She raged, "Long Fei Yi, are you going to publicly shield her like this?" It was Han Yunxi who said she wanted to fight one-on-one. Only then did Long Fei turn to look at her. Chu Qingge didn't expect this at all. His cold eyes gave her a start. This was the first time. Long Fei Yi had looked her in the eye for the first time. No matter how proud Chu Qingge was, her heart couldn't help but race. But Long Fei Yi only gave a cold snort before withdrawing his gaze and backing away from the door. Now Han Yunxi appeared before the crowd. Her clothes were clean and tidy, her hair in a neat bun. Her eyes were clear and bright, and her smile was light. She wasn't hurt at all. How could this be? Chu Qingge gaped. She couldn't believe it. Duanmu Bei and Chu Tianyin were equally shocked, but their shock differed from Chu Qingge's. The two of them exchanged glances as if realizing something. Han Yunxi easily stepped over the threshold of the stone door. When she saw Chu Qingge's blood-stained clothes, she smiled. "It looks like Miss Chu's injuries aren't light." "I'm not." Chu Qingge was still holding on. "Then did you lose?" Han Yunxi asked with a grin. Now Chu Qingge couldn't even hold on. No matter how light her injuries were, she'd still lost to Han Yunxi who wasn't hurt at all. How could this be? Big Brother had said before that the 5 doors were filled with dangers. No matter what, it couldn't be that she wasn't hurt at all. Chu Qingge couldn't figure it out, but Han Yunxi was standing right in front of her. She had no choice but to believe or act shamelessly. She couldn't help but steal a glance at Long Fei-yi, only to see that Long Fei-yi's gaze was fixed on Han Yunxi. He was so focused on her that his usual cold demeanor was nowhere to be seen. When she recalled Long Fei-yi's soft chuckle just then, Chu Qingge's heart broke into pieces. "If you lose, leave your clothes behind first, then," Han Yunxi said. At first she was still smiling, but when she turned to look at Duanmu Bei, her expression turned gloomy. In a cold voice, she said, "Then you can all scram." Unexpectedly, Duanmu Bei's figure flashed past, knocking aside Han Yunxi who was blocking his way and darting into the second door. There was only one explanation for Han Yunxi coming out unscathed, and that was that the second door had no dangers at all. Han Yunxi's luck was good and she'd made the right choice. Chu Tianyin had said that only one of the 5 doors led to the treasury. Either it had no dangers at all, or it was extremely dangerous. It looked like they were looking for the second door. Seeing Duanmu Bei dash in, Chu Tianyin's eyes flickered with a complicated look. Without hesitation, he pulled Chu Qingge along with him and the 2 siblings darted through the second door. If the second door was the one they were looking for, then he wouldn't miss it even if he had to break his promise and throw away his honor. That was because the thing he was looking for was too important. It was related to the clan's mission, and the so-called treasury was nothing more than a lie to trick Duanmu Bei. Long Fei-yi was holding on to Han Yunxi, who'd been knocked aside, so he didn't have time to stop them. After confirming that Han Yunxi was fine, he prepared to chase after them, but Han Yunxi hastily stopped him. "You can't go in, it's very dangerous inside." There was a dense swarm of black spiders inside. If it wasn't for Lil Thing keeping watch, anyone who went in would be hard-pressed to escape. Even if they didn't die, they'd be half dead. Why were Duanmu Bei and the rest fighting to get in first? Were they seeking death? Chapter 282. The second door was dangerous as well. Hearing Han Yunxi's dissuasion, Aunt Ru couldn't help but ask, "How was it dangerous? How did you come out unscathed?" Han Yunxi could hear Aunt Ru's doubts. She assumed that Long Fei-yi would ask the same question, but all he did was remain silent. He didn't add any more details. This guy isn't usually like this. He's always full of questions. Han Yunxi didn't have time to think, nor did she plan to explain herself to Aunt Ru. She laughed and joked, "Why should I tell you? You really don't know martial arts?" Aunt Ru asked again. Han Yunxi wasn't an idiot. She knew Aunt Ru didn't have any good intentions towards her. She could work together with Aunt Ru against a common enemy, but that didn't mean she'd bury the hatchet with her. A few hours ago, she'd almost lost her life to Aunt Ru's hidden weapons. She wasn't holding a grudge, but cherishing her own life. "Whether or not I know has nothing to do with you," Han Yunxi declared. But Aunt Ru suddenly grabbed Han Yunxi's wrist. At the same time, Long Fei-yi pressed down on her hand and said coldly, "She doesn't know martial arts. Don't delay, let's find the way." Aunt Ru had already felt Han Yunxi's pulse and knew that she was well suited for martial arts. But before she could continue, Long Fei-yi pulled her hand aside. "Enough." His gaze was sharp and his voice was filled with anger. Although he didn't express it, Aunt Ru could tell that he was both angry and sad. She never expected Fei to be so serious with her one day. No, she had to interrogate Tang Li properly. No matter how strong or useful Han Yunxi was, if she was truly a source of disaster, she had to be eliminated as soon as possible. Hiding her disappointment, Aunt Ru pretended that nothing had happened. "There's only 2 doors left. Which one should we take?" There was fire in the first, black spiders in the second, and heaven knows what Chu Qingge had encountered in the third. But judging from her injuries, the third was no less dangerous than the first 2. Now, only the 4th and 5th paths remained. No, it's still the 5 gates. Han Yunshi immediately denied, the secret passage is very deep. An hour is not enough to finish it. Besides, no one can be sure that the dangerous path is not the right one. Han Yunshi's thoughts were still very meticulous. Putting aside the fact that Duanmu Bei and the others might be looking for the same thing as them, based on the current situation of these 5 doors, either 4 of them were dangerous, and the safe one was the correct one, so Duanmu Bei and the others chose the second door, or all 5 doors were dangerous, and one of them was the correct one. Long Feiyi understood what she meant. He said calmly, let's check out the situation of the 4th and 5th paths first. Han Yunshi agreed wholeheartedly. Aunt Ru was immersed in her own thoughts and did not say anything else. But just as they were about to enter the 4th door, Han Yunshi suddenly felt something tickling her from inside her sleeve. What else could it be but Lil Thing? This little fellow was always able to slip out of her medical pouch without anyone noticing. Even Han Yunshi couldn't sense it. Why was it tickling her now? She couldn't respond to it. If Long Feiyi and Aunt Ru found out, the consequences would be unimaginable. Heaven knows if stealing the poison beast was one of Long Feiyi's goals for this trip. Han Yunshi allowed Lil Thing to tickle her as she continued to walk forward with Long Feiyi. But the closer she got to the 4th door, the more Lil Thing scratched. In the end, it even gently bit her hand. Of course, it didn't actually bite down. Now Han Yunshi took it seriously. There was a problem. Lil Thing seemed to be stopping her from going forward. Could it be that the 4th door was dangerous? No, the dangers inside weren't dangerous to Lil Thing at all. What was Lil Thing trying to tell her? She tried to stop and Lil Thing immediately let go of her. Sure enough, Lil Thing was stopping her from going forward. Since the dangers inside the door weren't dangerous to Lil Thing and it was stopping her, then there was only one possibility. Lil Thing wanted to lead her to the right path. Han Yunshi found that communicating with Lil Thing really required a lot of brain power. But they had only known each other for a few days. She believed that after a while, they would be able to understand each other. Let's go to the 5th door first. She said seriously. Why? Long Fei didn't understand. If Aunt Ru wasn't here, he would have asked her long ago. Ever since Han Yunshi was kidnapped and rescued, he'd had plenty of questions. She'd left after their argument at the medical academy, so he hadn't had a chance to ask her. The biggest question was how she saved Long Tianmo. The corrosive smell here is the weakest. Han Yunshi replied without hesitation. They were here for the corrosive smell, so this answer was convincing. She only hoped that Lil Thing wouldn't trick her. You can smell it? Aunt Ru immediately asked. People who studied poison all had a good sense of smell. She could smell that there was no difference between the 5 doors. If you don't believe me, you can go in and try. Han Yunshi's words blocked Aunt Ru's mouth. Aunt Ru was very unwilling, but she knew that her poison skills were not as good as Han Yunshi's. She could only endure and wait. Long Feiyi didn't have any suspicions and was about to walk towards the 5th door. Han Yunshi stopped him. Wait, let me take a good look and then we can decide. Rather than letting Long Feiyi and Aunt Ru test each door with her, it would be better for her to do it herself. It had to be said that Han Yunshi was very smart. This way, she wouldn't answer questions like, why? Long Feiyi nodded. Han Yunshi touched Lil Thing in her sleeve and walked towards the 5th door. This time, Lil Thing immediately scratched her again. She stopped and saw Long Feiyi and Aunt Ru looking at her. She didn't explain and changed to the 3rd door. She didn't expect Lil Thing to still scratch her. She couldn't take the 3rd door either. Now, only the 2nd door and the 1st door were left. Looking at the 2nd door, Han Yunshi's mouth twitched. This little bastard couldn't be thinking about eating spiders, right? Long Fei Yi and Aunt Ru looked at Han Yunxi walking back and forth at the door. They really thought that she was making a serious judgment. Han Yunxi crossed her arms and looked casual. In fact, she had secretly used 2 fingers to pinch Lil Thing's ears. This was a warning. If it dared to trick her again, it would have to bear the consequences. Just like that, Han Yunxi walked towards the second door while pinching Lil Thing's ears. Step by step, she walked slowly. Her attention was all on Lil Thing, waiting for its reaction. Who knew that when she was about to reach the second door, Lil Thing still didn't react? So, it was wishful thinking on her part. So, did it really want to go back and eat the black spiders? Han Yunxi wanted to drag Lil Thing out and throw it out. She couldn't help but sneak a glance at Long Fei Yi. She saw that he was also looking at her. It wasn't easy to lie in front of this man. What should she do? Is it the second door? Didn't you go in just now? Didn't you smell it? Aunt Ru immediately questioned. Han Yunxi was in a difficult position. She didn't know how to answer. At this moment, Lil Thing suddenly scratched her again. Han Yunxi was stunned. She couldn't believe it. Lil Thing curled up in its master's sleeve, its mouth squirming non-stop. Actually, it had been conflicted for a long time. It had indeed smelled a scent similar to the perplexing butterfly illusion. However, it was really conflicted. 3 people had just gone in. The human scent was so strong that it would definitely attract more black spiders to suck their blood. It couldn't bear to miss it. However, in the end, it still decided to be a loyal guardian beast. Seeing that its master still didn't move, Lil Thing scratched her again. This time, Han Yunxi regained her senses. She walked towards the first door. Lil Thing didn't scratch her again. Instead, it rubbed its little head against her arm coquettishly. She didn't expect Lil Thing to want her to go through the first door. Seeing that Han Yunxi had been standing there for so long, Long Fei Yi and Aunt Ru also came over. Here. Long Fei Yi was a little uncertain. There's a fire in here. The 3 of them were burned out just now, Aunt Ru said seriously. Duanmu Bei and the others were burned out. Who knew where the fire came from or how it burned them? Not to mention Long Fei Yi and Aunt Ru. Even Han Yunxi wasn't too sure. However, this was the path that Lil Thing pointed out, so she chose to believe it. This Lil Thing would play with her, but it wouldn't harm her. This is it. Let's go. Han Yunxi was very decisive. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything and pulled her hand domineeringly again. Han Yunxi struggled again, but she still failed like before. Although she was decisive and straightforward in her actions, she hated ambiguous relationships, and especially hated his lack of explanation. However, in the face of his domineering behavior, she would always unknowingly admit defeat, make an exception, and give in. She let him hold her hand and gradually intertwined their fingers. She lowered her eyes and told herself to ignore it. After entering the first passage, they walked for a very long time, but they didn't encounter anything. Han Yunxi adjusted her state of mind and seriously paid attention to the changes in the air. However, other than the purple miasma becoming fainter and fainter, there was nothing unusual about the rotting smell, and no poisonous gas appeared. The big fire that they were worried about also didn't appear. Even if they had to leave, they would have to leave for 2 days. Fortunately, they were prepared and had some dry rations on them. Otherwise, they would have to go hungry. On the second night, they saw the end of the secret passage. They saw that the surrounding walls were pitch black, and the luminous pearls were also damaged. It was obvious that it had been burned by a big fire. At the end of the passage, there was a wooden wall. The fire had burned a huge hole in it, and it could accommodate 2 people at a time. Long Fei Yi examined it seriously and found that the wooden door was at least half a meter thick. With this thickness, it couldn't be cut open by people. The fire would probably burn for a few days. Han Yunxi also looked around and said seriously, "Looks like Duanmu Bei and the others made the wedding dress for us." From the looks of it, the fire was triggered by a mechanism. After it was triggered, it burned for a few days and burned through the wooden door. And this kind of mechanism was a one-time thing. Once it was triggered, there wouldn't be a second time. They were relatively safe. If Duanmu Bei and the others knew the truth, would they be angered to death? At this time, they might still be trapped in the second door. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi was happy. She smiled and said, "Let's go in and take a look." Seeing Han Yunxi's happy expression, Long Fei Ye's usually cold lips subconsciously curled up. What would they find behind the wooden door? Chapter 283. As soon as they passed through the wooden door, they saw another secret passage. It wasn't made of stone, but more like a natural cave. It was pitch black inside without any luminous pearls to illuminate the way. Strangely enough, they didn't smell anything before entering the room, but as soon as they did, they caught a whiff of a strong acidic odor. Anyone could tell that it came from something extremely corrosive. This is the right path. Long Fei Yi took out a luminous pearl from the secret passage to illuminate the way, making the difference between the scents even more obvious. Han Yunxi had long activated her detox system, but couldn't find any traces of poison in the air. Her nerves were taut as she raised her guard. She was afraid that the detox system wouldn't be able to detect the poison and they'd be poisoned by it. Is this smell poisonous? Aunt Ru was worried as well. You guys stay here, I'll go take a look. Long Fei Yi was very straightforward, but Aunt Ru stopped him with a stern expression. Yi, your life is more important than anyone else's. You can't go. There was nothing wrong with her words. Long Fei Ye's life was too valuable. Few people in Cloud Realm continent could compare to him. But Han Yunxi found it strange no matter how she heard it. In the midst of her bewilderment, Aunt Ru added, Han Yunxi, you go. Hurry. Her tone was practically an order. She made it sound like her life was worthless. Han Yunxi wanted to say that she'd go take a look first. With Lil Thing around, she'd at least have an extra layer of protection. But hearing Aunt Ru order her around made her feel uncomfortable. The perplexing butterfly illusion belongs to you guys. It has nothing to do with me. Why should I go? Han Yunxi replied offhandedly. Long Fei Yi was about to speak, but fell silent at these words. His expression was cold, making it impossible to tell what he was thinking. Aunt Ru knitted her brows. So much for looking at Han Yunxi in a new light. In the end, this was the girl's attitude. Even if Long Fei Yi doted on her, she shouldn't be so arrogant. It seemed that she did not need to interrogate Tang Li anymore. This woman could not be used, no matter how capable she was. Aunt Ru did not avoid the topic and said directly, you never keep useless people by your side. Those who can't be used by you, Aunt Ru didn't continue speaking. Instead, she chuckled meaningfully. Obviously, he was talking about Han Yunxi. He. Was this a threat? Get rid of them just because they're useless. Silence. Han Yunxi did not refute. She also fell silent. She always knew that her greatest value to Long Fei was that she was useful. She couldn't understand why Long Fei Yi still wanted to save Duanmu Yao after rejecting the marriage proposal. Perhaps Duanmu Yao was still useful to him. She glanced at Long Fei Yi. Seeing that he had no intention of speaking, she became even more silent. Long Fei Ye's mother was a member of the Tang clan, so what about his father? Why was he trying so hard to figure out the perplexing butterfly illusion? Did it have anything to do with the poison sect? It's good that you have some self-awareness. Let's go, Aunt Rue muttered to herself, but her words were clearly meant for Han Yunxi to hear. Han Yunxi really didn't know what Aunt Rue took her for. Was she Long Fei Ye's assistant? Or was she his Wang Fei and subordinate? Han Yunxi didn't want to refute her. She'd found the clues anyway, so she'd still return the perplexing butterfly illusion to him. But just as she was about to take out the perplexing butterfly illusion, Long Fei Yi quietly took her hand. He didn't say anything, but walked back the way they came. Han Yunxi held the perplexing butterfly illusion in her other hand. She held on to it for a long time, but in the end, she silently placed it back in her medical pouch. Aunt Ruth stood on one side, feeling as if she'd been left behind. Her brows were furrowed. Yi Er's actions were like a slap to her face. How could this be? They didn't speak the entire way back. As luck would have it, Long Fei Ye's group had just emerged from the first door when Duanmu Bei and the rest came out of the second. All three of them were in a sorry state, each of them paler than the other. It was obvious that they'd lost too much blood. Duanmu Bei and Chu Tianyin were both shirtless, their bodies covered in bites from the black spiders. Duanmu Bei, who'd been the first to break in, was covered in cuts and bruises. There were even 2 gashes on his face. Duanmu Bei's robes were nowhere to be seen. Most likely, they'd been bitten to shreds. Chu Tianyin's robes were wrapped around Chu Qingga's body, covered in a thick layer of spider silk. If one didn't know better, they'd think it was a layer of yarn. Heaven knows how miserable they'd been in the past 2 days and nights. The 2 groups emerged at the same time and saw each other, giving a start. In the silence, Han Yunxi saw Chu Qingga's panicked expression and burst into laughter. There were a lot of black spiders in there, right? Leaving aside Chu Qingga, even Duanmu Bei was angry and embarrassed. One of them took out a bow, while the other unsheathed his sword. Han Yunxi, you liar. Duanmu Bei was the angriest of them all. What did I lie to you about? Did I tell you there was something good inside? Han Yunxi couldn't help but laugh again. Slut. Give me your life. Chu Qingga was flustered and exasperated as she prepared to shoot. But Chu Tianyin quickly stopped her and muttered, let's go. Big bro. Chu Qingga was so angry that she'd lost all reason. She didn't realize that the 3 of them combined were no match for one Long Fei Yi. Their injuries were too severe, so they had to treat the spider poison quickly. Treat the poison. Chu Tianyin raged. Only then did Chu Qingga set down her bow. He glanced at Duanmu Bei before leading Chu Qingga away without a word. Duanmu Bei brought up the rear. As he retreated, he warned, Long Fei Yi, my Western Zhou Imperial clan isn't so easy to bully. Then he turned to flee. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word, but tightened his grip on Han Yunxi as he chased after them. There was only one path and one direction in the secret passage, but Long Fei Yi had almost caught up when Duanmu Bei's trio suddenly disappeared around a corner. Long Fei Yi chased after them and inspected the passage before discovering a switch in the corner that led to another path. No wonder the tree trunk outside was perfectly fine while they were here. We can't stay here for long. Let's go back the way we came first, Aunt Rue said seriously. Heaven knows if the path Duanmu Bei and the rest took would be dangerous. Long Fei Yi listened to her and didn't chase after them. But he walked quickly with Han Yunxi in his arms. It wasn't long before Aunt Rue had trouble catching up. Han Yunxi could tell that he was doing it on purpose. Is he trying to shake off Aunt Rue? But Long Fei Yi used this time to start asking questions. Despite his silence, he was still as domineering as ever. As soon as he opened his mouth, he got straight to the point. What did you use to save Long Tianmo? Han Yunxi didn't get used to it. She assumed that this fellow didn't know how to talk to her anymore. I've been concocting an antidote this entire time. Fortunately, I succeeded that night. Han Yunxi had long thought of an answer. When Gu asked, she'd give him the same answer. Heaven knows if these two fellows would try to take advantage of Lil Thing. Lil Thing hadn't fully recovered yet, so it was still too weak to protect itself. If they wanted to take it by force, she really wouldn't be able to fight them. Actually, if Lil Thing hadn't jumped onto Gu Beiyua's body that day, she wouldn't have told Gu Beiyua about Lil Thing's existence. She didn't want anyone to know about this. If this were to spread, not to mention how the medical school would deal with her, the people fighting for the poisonous beast in the world wouldn't let her off. Such a coincidence? Long Fei Yi was obviously suspicious. However, as long as Han Yunxi didn't change her story, he didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to find any loopholes. How did that white-robed man save you? Long Fei Yi asked again. A chance encounter, Han Yunxi said lightly. Why did he save you? Long Fei Yi asked again. Han Yunxi had a helpless look on her face. I want to know too. Her words were the truth. Seeing Long Fei Yi's complicated gaze, she smiled and asked openly, Long Fei Yi, do you also suspect that I'm the orphan of Western Qin, the person that the Shadow Clan wants to protect? Chapter 284. Of course Long Fei Yi had his suspicions. When he saw Han Yunxi's magnanimous eyes and heard her question, he didn't feel relieved. Instead, the complicated look in his eyes deepened. This was the first time Han Yunxi had seen this fellow so preoccupied. Han Yunxi didn't have any ambitions to revive the imperial clan. Moreover, Long Fei Yi wasn't Tianning's emperor. If she really was, she wouldn't be a threat to him at all. Perhaps she could even be of help to him. She thought that Long Fei Yi would be very interested, but Long Fei Yi only said mildly, perhaps he's here for the poison beast. As I see it, it doesn't seem like it, Han Yunxi said seriously. But Long Fei Yi didn't seem to want to continue this topic. He avoided it and asked, what are you doing here? She'd brought Lil Thing here to eat, and for the sake of the perplexing butterfly illusion. To find a few medicinal plants, Han Yunxi replied mildly. Did you find them? Long Fei Yi asked again. Han Yunxi nodded. It was as if their previous quarrel had never happened. The two of them spoke naturally and unknowingly fell into silence. After a long time, Han Yunxi spoke up first. That Andrew is, unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi didn't hide anything and replied directly, my mother's younger sister. So she really was his biological aunt. No wonder she dared to lecture Long Fei Yi. She's also from the Tang clan. Han Yunxi asked again. Second master, Tang Li's father is the clan head, Long Fei Yi replied mildly. Your father is also from the Tang clan? Han Yunxi asked again. This time, a trace of hesitation flashed past Long Fei Yi's eyes. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't see it. Long Fei Yi nodded. Yes. Han Yunxi actually believed her just like that. She thought that this was right. The Tang family's women didn't marry outside the family. Was this fellow in a good mood today, or was there something wrong? He actually answered every question. Between them, it was really rare for them to chat so calmly. Han Yunxi seized this opportunity and threw out a few more questions. Although Long Fei Yi was a man of few words, he still answered her questions one by one. The perplexing butterfly illusion belongs to the poison sect. Yes. Perplexing butterfly illusion is related to the Tang sect's poison techniques, right? Yes. Could the decline of the Tang sect's poison arts be related to the destruction of the Medical Academy's poison sect? A little. You want to obtain the poison sex power. Revive the Tang sex poison techniques. Yeah. Han Yunxi asked a question that had nothing to do with the previous one. She lifted her head to look at him, her eyes as clear as ever. Long Fei Yi, why did you save Duan Miao? Long Fei Yi didn't expect this at all. Looking at her, he unconsciously stopped in his tracks. Han Yunxi stared into his eyes as if she wanted to see right through him. Long Fei Yi also looked at her, his lips pursed as if he was hesitating. Han Yunxi didn't press him for an answer. She waited. She'd already answered all the questions she hadn't answered because of their fight. Shouldn't he give her an explanation about Duan Miao? Even if he didn't, he should at least answer her questions. Their eyes met, but Long Fei Yi remained silent even after Aunt Ru caught up to them. No explanation, not even a perfunctory answer. When Aunt Ru saw them like this, she urged, "Why aren't you leaving?" In the end, Long Fei Yi didn't give her an answer. He avoided Han Yunxi's gaze and continued forward. Han Yunxi didn't ask any more questions. She looked at his intertwined fingers and didn't try to break free. Instead, a cold smile rose to her lips. Long Fei Yi, you said I provoked you. But between the two of us, who's the one who provoked who more? After leaving the secret passage, they found that it was a sunny day outside. The forest was very quiet in the afternoon, and they were lucky to have avoided the night insects. Han Yunxi didn't look for Gu Beiyue and the others. Lil Thing had saved Gu, so the two of them should be safe now. Perhaps they'd already left this place. She didn't bat an eyelid as she allowed Long Fei Yi to bring her back to the inn. It was the same inn as before, the Sky Room number 1. Aunt Ru followed them inside and looked around. It wasn't clear what she was interrogating, but after looking around, she said, Yi, come with me for a bit. Han Yunxi could tell that she was avoiding her. She took the initiative to say, I'm going back to the medical academy. No need. Come back to Tianning with this prince first thing in the morning tomorrow, Long Fei Yi said domineeringly. I still have things to do. Han Yunxi's tone was especially calm. She'd never spoken so calmly to this fellow before. What is it? Long Fei Yi asked. Pack my luggage. My things are still there, Han Yunxi replied. She had a lot of things to do. I'll have the servants clean it up later. You should rest first. Long Fei Yi hesitated, then added, I'll be right next door. Han Yunxi didn't care where he was. Her expression was serious. I like to pack my things myself. There's also a lot of medicinal ingredients that the servants won't understand. Long Fei Yi was about to go with her when Tang Li's pained cries came from next door. Long Fei Yi couldn't help but frown as he looked towards Aunt Ru. I'll wait for you next door. Aunt Ru smiled. Without a word, she turned and left. Someone come, escort the Princess Consort to the medical academy. Go and come back quickly. Long Fei Yi couldn't be bothered with Han Yunxi right now as he hurriedly chased after Aunt Ru. Very soon, Tang Li's cries rose again as if he'd been badly abused. Han Yunxi was bewildered. It looked like Aunt Ru had done something to Tang Li. Of course, she didn't have the spare energy to pay attention to these matters. She looked meaningfully at the Imperial Guard. You want to go to the medical academy with me? This guard was the one who'd been scolded by Han Yunxi before. He trembled with fear as he nodded. This subordinate will escort Nyang Nyang there. Then I'll have to trouble you. Han Yunxi was very polite. The guard only felt a chill run down his back. He didn't know how to reply when Han Yunxi's hand reached out towards his face. It looked like she was going to tease him by the chin. The guard was frightened and backed away. Esteemed Wang Fei, don't what? Han Yunxi faintly smiled and snapped her fingers. The guard's eyes rolled back as he leaned against the wall behind him and slowly fell to the ground. Drugging an unsuspecting person was as easy as flipping her hand for Han Yunxi. She took out the perplexing butterfly illusion and placed it on the table. Amidst the continuous cries coming from next door, she strode out. In the next room, Tang Li had been tied to the bed for 4 whole days. He was so hungry that his chest was sticking to his back, but that wasn't important. What was important was that he really wanted to go to the outhouse. He'd already reached his limit. "Aunt Rue, I've said everything I needed to say. Just let me go. Long Fei Yi is right here. If there's anything you need, just ask him directly. Why are you tormenting me? Aunt Rue, if you don't let me go, I'll definitely complain to my mother when I get back. Aw. I can't take it anymore." Aunt Rue allowed Tang Li to clamor and scream as she sat by the bed calmly. She smiled and said, "You said that girls' poison skills are only so-so." Tang Li glanced at Long Fei Yi from the corner of his eye. He didn't dare to answer for a long time. He originally wanted to go to the poisonous herb storage with Long Fei Yi, but who knew that Long Fei Yi would go crazy and leave early, leaving him to oversleep in the inn and get caught red-handed by Aunt Rue. The moment Aunt Rue arrived, she tied him up and interrogated him about Han Yunxi. He had basically reduced Han Yunxi to a source of trouble. "You said that she's spoiled and unreasonable, and likes to throw tantrums?" Aunt Rue asked again. The corner of Tang Li's mouth twitched. He even forgot to go to the outhouse and didn't say anything. "You said that she's a source of trouble, and that Yi, is head over heels for her." Yi, gave her the perplexing butterfly illusion. Aunt Rue asked again. Tang Li really wanted to see Long Fei Yi's expression right now. Unfortunately, he didn't dare. "You also said that she's a fickle woman who has hooked up with many men." Aunt Rue laughed, but Tang Li almost cried. This was because Long Fei Yi had already walked in front of him. That handsome face of his was covered in dark clouds. It was so dark that it was frightening. He slowly leaned forward. His cold face that angered both men and gods was almost touching Tang Li's face. He asked word by word, "What else did you say?" Tang Li's back was drenched in cold sweat. His lips were tightly pursed, and he didn't dare to speak. Long Fei Yi got closer and closer. He tilted his head and whispered into Tang Li's ear, about the Shadow Clan. Before he could finish, Tang Li immediately denied it. No. It was because of the Shadow Clan that he had slandered Han Yunxi in front of Aunt Rue. If Han Yunxi was really the person that the Shadow Clan wanted to protect, then it was destined that Han Yunxi would be irreconcilable with them forever. Long Fei Yi would have to abandon this woman. That day at the medical school, he had personally witnessed Long Fei Yi's abnormality. He had almost taken Han Yunxi. However, when faced with that white robe, he had finally calmed down. Faced with Han Yunxi's questioning, he hadn't explained anything about Duan Muyao. Tang Li knew that Long Fei Yi was still hesitant about Han Yunxi. They had grown up together. He knew very well that Long Fei Yi was the kind of person who wouldn't easily pick up something. However, once he picked it up, he definitely wouldn't let it go. If he was determined to take it, he definitely wouldn't abandon it. He had to stop everything from happening while Long Fei Yi was still hesitating. And Aunt Rue had come at the right time. Of course, he didn't reveal the Shadow Clan. Otherwise, with Aunt Rue's personality, who would rather kill the wrong person than miss out, Han Yunxi would undoubtedly die. Seeing Long Fei Yi and Tang Li whispering in each other's ears, Aunt Rue wasn't happy. She smiled and said, "What are you two brothers whispering about that you can't let me know?" Long Fei Yi didn't answer. Of course, Tang Li didn't dare to answer either. Could it be that Han Yunxi has some secret that you can't let me know? Aunt Rue pretended to be joking as she asked. At this time, Long Fei finally stood up. He didn't answer Andrew and personally untied Tang Li. Andrew stretched out a hand and fiercely pressed down on Tang Li's body. She coldly said, "What's the rush? He's going to die from holding it in. Are you going to pay for my aunt's son?" Long Fei asked indifferently. Tang Li's mother, who was also the wife of the Tang sect master, was famous for doting on her son. Otherwise, why would Tang Li run away from home for so long? If it were in the past, Aunt Ru would have given in. As his elder sister, she was still rather wary of her sister-in-law. But this time, she didn't. She had seen how well treated Han Yunxi in the past 3 or 4 days. This wasn't a small matter. She admitted that Han Yunxi had the right to stay by her side, but her background had to be investigated thoroughly. Tang Li, where did Han Yunxi learn her poison techniques? Aunt Ru was asking Tang Li, but her cold gaze was fixed on Long Fei. Note to the readers, I can only update once today. The second update will be updated around 6 p.m. tomorrow. Love you. If it weren't for the fact that he was full of worries, he would have noticed the abnormality in the room long ago. Unfortunately, he didn't. Tang Li landed beside him. Like him, he lay down and stared at the starry sky, not daring to say anything. He had framed Han Yunxi so that Aunt Ru could interfere with Long Fei. While Long Fei was still hesitating, Aunt Ru could make a decision for him. Even if Han Yunxi was a good helper, Long Fei definitely could not keep her by his side, much less be tempted by her. After a long time, seeing that Long Fei had no intention of settling the score with him, Tang Li finally said, "Big brother, let's take back the perplexing butterfly illusion." Long Fei did not answer. "Big brother, you're not explaining Duanmu Yao's matter because you're taking the opportunity to reject that woman. Since you've already rejected her, why don't you let go?" As a bystander, Tang Li saw all of Long Fei's conflicts during this period of time. He had clearly rejected a woman, yet he stubbornly kept her by his side and silently treated her well. How was this his style? Seeing that Long Fei was still not saying anything, Tang Li said coldly, "Big brother, if she really is a descendant of Western Qin's imperial family, the Tang sect will definitely kill her. You wouldn't dare." Long Fei finally spoke. Since he had already said this, Tang Li threw caution to the wind. "If she really is, you should kill her even more than the Tang sect. Don't forget how your mother died." This was the second time he had heard this today. How did his mother die? Long Fei narrowed his eyes cold as he looked at Tang Li. His entire being exuded a terrifying murderous aura. Tang Li was not afraid and looked back at him confidently. Tang Li also admired Han Yunxi. He also hoped that Han Yunxi had nothing to do with the Shadow Clan. He also hoped that Han Yunxi could walk into Long Fei's heart. Unfortunately, the appearance of the Shadow Clan made all of this impossible. She's most likely Western Qin's orphan. Tang Li was very certain. Unexpectedly, Long Fei suddenly grabbed him by the neck and warned him word by word, "It doesn't matter if she is or not. She's still this princess consort. She must stay by this prince's side. Go tell Aunt Ru to stop having any ideas about her. Otherwise, I won't be polite." Wasn't it just a woman? Did this guy have to be so stubborn? Tang Li flung his hand away and said coldly, "Long Fei, can you get past the hurdle in your heart?" If he could get past the hurdle in his heart, why did he keep hiding Duanmu Yao's matter and let Han Yunxi be disappointed again and again? Long Fei was slightly taken aback. He did not reply and turned around to head towards the medical academy. Tang Li chased after him and shouted, "Long Fei, Han Yunxi is not the kind of woman who can be forced to stay." Long Fei naturally heard him, but he did not turn around. He thought that Han Yunshi should still be packing her things at this time. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Han Yunshi actually did not have much to pack. As soon as she returned to the medical academy, she went to look for Gu Beiyue and the others. As she expected, Gu and Gu Beiyue could not find her and went back first. Although Gu could be very petty at times, he was still very gentlemanly this time and did not leave Gu Beiyue alone in the poisonous grass storage. At this time, the three of them were in Luo Zuishan's courtyard. "Who saved you?" Han Yunshi asked tentatively. She was not sure if Gu had seen Lil Thing or if he had recognized it as the poisonous beast. Gu shrugged. "I don't know what happened, but those man-eating vines suddenly wilted. There were plenty of poisonous insects in the poison grounds to begin with, so every creature had its vanquisher. Perhaps something had subdued the man-eating vines, but Gu Qishao didn't take it to heart. He teased, 'Poison lass, you're so heartless as to leave with Long Fei without caring whether I live or die.' It seemed that Lil Thing did not expose itself. 'Good job. Your life or death has nothing to do with me.' Han Yunshi replied with a smile and secretly touched the medical pouch. Lil Thing enjoyed its master's caress through the cloth and looked intoxicated. It remembered that when it came back to look for its master that day, it saw the beautiful man in red trapped by the man-eating vines. It admitted that it hesitated at that time. Should it wait for the man-eating vines to eat the beautiful man in red before it ate the man-eating vines? After all, eating the man-eating vines like this would be more nutritious. However, just as it was hesitating and thinking about how strong the relationship between its master and the beautiful man in red was, the man in white used a small throwing knife to silently cut off the roots of all the man-eating vines. Lil Thing hid first and waited for the two people to leave before it went to eat the vines. It did not know why its master was suddenly caressing it so gently. In any case, it was fine as long as its master liked it. Han Yunshi's answer made Luo Zuishan's face darken, but Gu was not angry. He squinted and smiled. "Then how can I have a relationship with you?" "Well, a shameless person is invincible." Han Yunshi expressed defeat and was too lazy to pay attention to him. After confirming that Gu and Gu Beiyue had returned safely, Han Yunshi was relieved. "Imperial Physician Gu, you can go back with His Highness the Crown Prince and Qin Wang Rong. I still have matters to attend to, so I won't be going with you." Gu Beiyue nodded to show that he understood. He didn't even ask why. No matter how close he was to Han Yunshi, he still maintained the status of superior and subordinate without overstepping his boundaries. "You're going with Long Fei Yi?" Gu immediately asked. Han Yunshi did not answer directly, only saying indifferently, "I still have something to do." She got up to leave after she finished speaking. A trace of suspicion flashed through Gu Beiyue's eyes, but he did not say anything. Gu chased after her. "What else do you have to do?" "Private matters." Han Yunshi's meaning was very obvious, but Gu just had to ask, "What private matters?" If not for the fact that she wanted to see Gu Beiyue, Han Yunshi would have really regretted coming here. She would have gone directly to Third Elder. Once she was targeted by this guy, he would pester her to death. Looking at Gu, Han Yunshi's brows were tightly knitted. Seeing her expression, Gu did not give in. Instead, he laughed. "Poison girl, you still haven't told me how you cured Long Timo's poison." Han Yunshi was still using the same excuse to deal with Long Fei Yi to deal with Gu. Gu was very suspicious. What a coincidence. Han Yunshi did not say much. "Excuse me." However, Gu just wouldn't leave. He followed her all the way to Third Elder's place. Han Yunshi finally stopped. "What do you want?" "Tell me who taught you your poison skills." Gu Qishao had come for this in the end. How annoying. Han Yunshi was already in a bad mood. When she heard this, she almost hit him. At this moment, third elder walked over alone from a side path. Han Yunshi had only just turned around when Goose suddenly disappeared. He dodged very quickly. This guy was clearly familiar with the medical academy, but he was so secretive. It was as if he was afraid of being seen. What was going on? Alright, Han Yunshi didn't have the energy to care so much. She had plenty of things to do. Madame Tianxin, the Shadow Clan, and the Poison Sect. These three names seemed unlikely to coexist, but they seemed to coexist on her body. Han Yunshi gathered her thoughts and walked towards Third Elder. Third Elder had just returned from the Council of Elders. The poison beast had been stolen, the Gu arts had reappeared, and Shi Yuba had escaped. These three matters had thrown the medical academy's higher-ups into a frenzy. He'd finally managed to sneak back and rest. As soon as he saw Han Yunshi, Third Elder was puzzled. Esteemed Wang Fei hasn't left yet. His Highness Duke of Qin came looking for her just now. He just left. Should I send someone to chase after him? Long Fei Yi hadn't been able to find Han Yunshi. When he saw her, he thought that she'd packed up and left, so he returned to the inn. Han Yunshi avoided the question and said indifferently, Third Elder, there's something I want to ask you in private. Note to the reader, let me catch up on yesterday's update. Chapter 286. Han Yunshi followed Third Elder into the rooms. She couldn't help but wonder what Long Fei Yi was doing right now. Had he seen the perplexing butterfly illusion she'd left on the table? Would he be angry if he knew she'd left without saying goodbye? In her absent-mindedness, she didn't notice Gu Qishao hiding on one side, narrowing his eyes as he stared at her with interest. Hearing that it was a private matter, Third Elder dismissed everyone as soon as they arrived at the guest hall. He invited Han Yunshi to sit down. Esteemed Wang Fei, please have a seat of honor. Third Elder personally brewed tea without any of the airs of an elder. This wasn't only because Han Yunshi's acupuncture skills had won him over, but also because Han Yunshi's magnanimity for winning but not winning. Han Yunshi wasn't used to such a gentle Third Elder. If they weren't enemies, she would still be very polite. She quickly took the teacup from Third Elder's hands and said, It's better for this junior to do it. Third Elder can just call me Yunshi. This. Third Elder hesitated. We're not in Tianning, so there's no need for such formalities. Moreover, I'm a junior, Han Yunshi smiled. Third Elder nodded in delight. Han Yunshi sighed with emotion in her heart. Although Third Elder couldn't represent the medical academy, he wasn't an ordinary person. He was the first person she'd made friends with in Cloud Realm Continent. Esteemed Wang Fei, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. This old man's lips are sealed. Third Elder said seriously. Naturally, private matters had to be kept secret. With his words, Han Yunshi no longer held back. I want to know how my father, Han Kongan, became a director in the past. Third Elder never expected Han Yunshi to ask such a question. He stroked his beard and asked, What do you want to know? Since she'd chosen to ask, Han Yunshi didn't hide anything. With my father's strength, I'm afraid it'd be difficult for him to become a director, she said. Third Elder immediately understood what he was trying to say. Directors had to be nominated by the Council of Elders and approved by a vote. However, if they weren't medical saints like Luo Zuishan and Shi Yuba, they would rarely be remembered by the Council of Elders. Han Kongan was disqualified from being a director last year. Third Elder still remembered this name. He muttered to himself, Han Kongan. Han Kongan. Han Yunshi waited and couldn't help but ask, Has Elder heard of my mother, Lady Tianxin? Lady Tianxin had a great reputation in Tianning's capital city, but her name was unknown in the medical academy or even in Cloud Realm Continent. Madame Tianxin. Third Elder thought for a while and shook his head. I have never heard of her. Perhaps he'd heard of her before, but had forgotten. After all, Lady Tianqin's name had spread throughout Tianning's capital over a decade ago. Han Yunxi remembered that when she first arrived at the medical school, Madame Lianxin had mentioned Han Kongin and Madame Tianqin, but she had only said that she had heard of them. At that time, she had thought that Madame Lianxin was purposely trying to intimidate her. Now, looking at Third Elder's reaction, it seemed that Madame Lianxin was speaking the truth. However, Third Elder didn't even know Madame Tianqin. How did Madame Tianqin help Han Kongin get the director position? Could it have something to do with the other elders? Han Yunxi was bewildered. She was the one who helped my father get the director position. Third Elder's eyes flickered with hesitation as he tried his best to recall. There were far too many unfair elections like this, and Han Kongin wasn't the only one. He could only be certain that Han Kongin hadn't been the one to let him in. Soon enough, Third Elder understood and said meaningfully, when Han Kongin was elected director, the Council of Elders didn't nominate him. What's going on? Han Yunxi asked anxiously. 2 elders from the Council of Elders passed away that year, so the director election was personally presided over by the 2 vice directors, Third Elder said seriously. Above the Council of Elders in the Medical Academy were the vice directors and directors. There were 4 vice directors in total. Han Yunxi's heart grew cold at these words. It was obvious that Han Kongin's election as director was the result of someone going easy on him. Forget about asking the 4 vice directors herself, even if she had Third Elder help her find out what happened that year, there'd be no results. Everyone had a tacit understanding of the existence of someone going easy on him, but they'd never expose it. If Third Elder went to ask the higher-ups, he'd definitely offend someone. Han Yunxi could only be certain that Madame Tianqin wasn't involved with the Council of Elders. Perhaps she was related to the 4 vice directors. Han Yunxi was still rejoicing over the fact that she'd made friends with an elder, but she never expected her mother to be so much more formidable than her. A vice director was above everyone else in the medical academy, second only to one person. Seeing Han Yunxi's disappointed expression, Third Elder hesitated before murmuring in a low voice, "Yunxi, it's not something that can be solved with silver alone." In other words, the vice director didn't lack silver. Even if he did, he wouldn't easily do things for others. Thus, Madame Tianqin must have an excellent relationship with the person who helped her. Han Yunxi nodded. She understood the importance of this relationship. How about this? The higher-ups are all busy right now. After a while, this old man will introduce you to them. Third Elder was still very enthusiastic. Third Elder couldn't ask, but Han Yunxi could probe. Someone who was close to her mother would at least give her some face. Han Yunxi rejoiced. "Many thanks, Elder." Just as she was about to leave, Gu smiled and said, "Poison lass, have you heard of Muexian?" Han Yunxi shook her head. She didn't know why he suddenly asked this. Gu put an arm around her shoulder and smiled. "Let's go. I'll take you to Medicine City to meet her." Han Yunxi immediately pushed him away. "I'm not interested." However, Gu hugged her again. Han Yunxi was about to push him away when he whispered in her ear, "Muexian is Madame Tianqin. She's also your mother's maiden name. She's from Medicine City's Mu family." Han Yunxi was stunned when she heard this. She looked at him in disbelief. Gu really liked how Han Yunxi looked when she only had eyes for him. He was just joking, but now he couldn't help but hug her even tighter. "Poison lass, come with me." Han Yunxi suddenly pushed him away. She used so much force that he almost fell to the ground. "You hooligan. Don't blame me for being rude if you touch me again. Do you think I'll believe you just because you made up a random name? Do you think I'm a fool?" This guy had even suspected that Han Kongin was from the Tang clan when he saw her hidden weapons. How could he have found out Madame Tianqin's true identity so quickly? Gu wasn't anxious. He smiled and said, "Why don't you go back and ask Third Elder if Madame Lianqin has an affair with Vice Academy head Lin? You can also ask him if Madame Lianqin has an older sister who's been missing for a long time." Han Yunqi became serious when she heard this. She remembered Gu Beiyue saying that Fourth Elder Madame Lianqin was from Medicine City's Mu family. She wasn't young anymore, but she was still only a fourth-ranked divine doctor. Despite that, she was able to occupy a seat in the Elders' Council. This wasn't just because she had the backing of Medicine City's Mu family. She also had the support of the Medical Academy's upper echelons. If Madame Lianqin and Vice Academy head Lin had an affair, it was very likely that she could become an elder, let alone a director position. If Madame Tianqin hadn't died, she would probably be around the same age as Madame Lianqin. In other words, it was very likely that Madame Tianqin didn't have a relationship with the Medical Academy's upper echelons, but one of her sisters. Han Yunqi looked at the brilliant smile on Gu's face. She still couldn't believe it. According to what you're saying, why is Madame Lianqin always targeting me? Madame Lianqin had been the most unkind of person in her rivalry with Third Elder. That's a matter between the two sisters. Han Kongan was stripped of his position as a director, but no one stepped forward to protect him, right? Gu asked back with a smile. How do you know? Han Yunqi asked again. Gu didn't answer. He even withdrew his smile and said indifferently, "Let's go. I'll tell you when we reach Medicine City." Han Yunqi would undoubtedly go. Chapter 287. That night, Han Yunqi left with Gu without hesitation. Gu silently led her down a very remote road. Han Yunqi, who was unfamiliar with the road, only noticed the problem after walking halfway. This is the way to Medicine City. She was suspicious, but she wasn't afraid that Gu would kidnap her. If he really wanted to, he wouldn't have waited until now and spent so much effort. This road is a secret passage used to transport medicine specially supplied to the Medical Academy by Medicine City. It's a shortcut, so there won't be any robbers, Gu explained honestly. Due to the nature of this road, it was destined that only a few people in Medicine City and Medical City knew of its existence. Long Fei Yi had heard of this road before, but in his current state of madness, he couldn't recall it. When he couldn't find Han Yunqi in the Medical Academy, he thought that she had returned to the inn. However, when he returned to the inn and saw the unconscious guard on the ground and the perplexing butterfly illusion on the table, he almost lost control. He mobilized all the men he could find in the vicinity to guard the 4 main gates of Medical City. At the same time, he divided his men into 2 groups. One group searched the city while the other chased out the 4 main gates. Long Fei Yi had already searched the Medical Academy once and asked Gu Beiyue, Luo Zuishan, Third Elder, and even Long Tianma and Qinwang Rong, who hadn't left yet, but to no avail. Fortunately, Third Elder had seen the world. Otherwise, he might have spilled the truth upon seeing Long Fei Yi's cold and angry appearance. At this time, Long Fei Yi was standing on the roof of the Medical Academy's tallest building. His robes and hair fluttered in the wind as he overlooked all of Medical City. It was dusk, and the afterglow of the sun illuminated everything in Medical City with a golden luster. However, the light couldn't penetrate his eyes, which were as dark as midnight. His entire body exuded a terrifying aura of viciousness, like a demon descending with the curtain of night. Every now and then, a black-robed guard would come to report, but even when the sun had set and night had fallen, he still hadn't received any good news. At this time, another guard came to report, "Your Highness, we've already chased them for 50 li from the west gate, but there's no trace of the Princess Consort. Please." Before he could finish his sentence, he suddenly kicked out and sent the guard flying into the darkness. "Useless thing," he said coldly. His entire being seemed to be bathed in flames of fury. Han Yunshi, how dare you leave? Since you dared to leave without saying goodbye, you must not let this prince find you. Men, pass down my order. Seal off the Han residence. No one is allowed to enter or leave. Cold as he commanded, that woman had no idea that he'd been the one protecting the Han clan all this time after leaving the capital. Otherwise, Emperor Tianhui would have made his move long ago. Han Yunshi followed Gu and left Medical City in less than 2 hours. She didn't know that Long Fei Yi had been looking for her in Medical City for 3 days and 3 nights. By the 4th day, there was still no news. He issued a bounty for anyone in Cloud Realm continent who could provide clues or find Han Yunshi herself would be rewarded with 10,000 taels of gold. Tang Li couldn't stand it anymore and said, "Big bro, you're letting the entire world know that Qin Wangfei's gone missing. Your lordship wants her to know that she shouldn't think of staying anywhere else in the world besides your lordship's," Long Fei Yi said. "You." Tang Li didn't know how to coax him. With her personality, a forcibly picked melon won't be sweet. She was the one who kicked down the sedan chair. Your lordship didn't force her. Long Fei Ye's anger had yet to subside, but only grew. Tang Li paused before asking, could it have been that man from the Shadow Clan who took her away? Long Fei Yi didn't answer, but gave Tang Li a deep look. Tang Li knew that the Shadow Clan had already become a taboo topic. But Aunt Ru was standing right outside the door and heard their conversation. Shadow Clan. Aunt Ru was so shocked that she almost screamed out loud. Shadow Clan. Wasn't the Shadow Clan destroyed? How could there be a Shadow Clan? Could it be that there were still descendants of Western Qin's imperial family? What was the relationship between Han Yunshi and the Shadow Clan? What did Tang Li mean by that? Aunt Ru was about to rush over and ask, but she stopped after thinking for a moment. Even Tang Li dared to hide such an important matter from her. If she rushed over, how could they say anything? Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi, Aunt Ru's eyes hardened as she looked at Long Fei Ye's thin back. She turned around and left. That day, she gathered all of the Tang sect's men that Long Fei Yi had borrowed. As the second in command, she issued a secret order to kill Han Yunshi without mercy. At this time, even Tang Li didn't know about this. She didn't care who Han Yunshi was, nor did she care about Han Yunshi's relationship with the Shadow Clan. The Shadow Clan represented Western Qin's imperial family. Once Western Qin's imperial family was implicated, she had to eliminate the source of trouble. The news quickly spread. Unfortunately, Gu and Han Yunshi had taken the mountain path. Before they reached Medicine City, they'd only passed by small villages at most. News wasn't that fast. At this time, the two of them were each riding a horse on a small path in the wilderness. Mu Axian and Lianxin, they're sisters, but why are their fates so different? Han Yunshi asked curiously. She wasn't sure if Gu knew that Han Kongan wasn't her biological father. She also didn't know why Gu was investigating Lady Tianxin, so she chose to hide it for now. It really is a little big. One seduced a married man, while the other married into the poison sect, Gu laughed. Han Yunshi was bewildered. Married into the poison sect. What do you mean? In truth, Gu had been investigating Mu Axian for a long time. When he was young, he'd overheard that a daughter of the Mu clan in Medicine City was having an affair with a descendant of the poison sect. He'd been investigating the matter ever since. He'd purposely approached Mu Ling because of Mu Axian. After many years of investigation, he'd finally confirmed that the Mu clan's daughter was called Mu Axian. She was the 4th daughter and had been missing for many years. If he hadn't coincidentally seen the Axian character embroidered on the back of Han Yunshi's medical pouch, he would never have guessed that it was Lady Tianxin. The Axayan character had also appeared on the things Mu Axayan had left behind in the Mu clan. Following the Axayan character, he'd finally confirmed that the missing Mu Axayan was the same Lady Tianxin who'd married Han Kongin and changed her surname to Bailey Tianxin. Gu Qishao didn't hold back at all as he told Han Yunxi everything. Han Yunxi listened in a daze, her heart secretly shocked by one thing. So her birth father was from the poison sect. Was that why little thing was so clingy? Poison lass, are you saying that you're Han Kongin's daughter, or? Gu purposely paused and leaned closer to her, his voice very low. Or are you also a descendant of the poison sect? Only Lady Tianxin knew about this. If she hadn't told Han Kongin that she was pregnant back then, he probably wouldn't have known. Of course Gu didn't know, which was why he'd asked. Han Yunxi's mouth twitched. This guy had told her everything. Should she tell him, or not? Hey, why are you investigating Mu Axayan? Do you have a grudge against the poison sect? Han Yunxi asked instead of answering. Gu suddenly burst into laughter. Poison lass, take a guess. Han Yunxi smiled as well. What if I accidentally become a descendant of the poison sect? You won't expose me, will you? This was Han Yunxi's first time learning that there were still descendants of the poison sect. From what she knew, the poison sect was different from the medical academy. The head of the medical academy was chosen through election while the head of the poison sect was hereditary. Thus, the descendant of the poison sect referred to the bloodline of the head of the poison sect. If Lady Tianxin was a daughter of the Mu clan and her father was the head of the poison sect, then she would have nothing to do with the Shadow clan. That white-robed man wasn't here to protect her. There was too much information, so Han Yunxi's mind wandered off and she forgot about her joke with Gu. Meanwhile, Gu Qishao was seriously considering her joke. If she really did become a descendant of the poison sect, what would he do? Han Yunxi, Gu, have never believed in ghosts or gods since I was young. Today, I'm praying to the heavens that you're not a descendant of the poison sect. I'm praying that you're not a poison woman. Before they knew it, the two of them were lost in each other's thoughts. It was rare for them to be so quiet when they were together. The white horses traveled side by side, one dressed in white robes while the other dressed in purple robes. As they traveled through the forest, anyone who didn't know better would think they were a pair of lovers who didn't envy mandarin ducks or immortals. But their hearts were heavy as they pondered the most important thing in their lives. After Gu and Han Yunxi left the forest, the Chu siblings emerged from the side. Although the two of them were dressed neatly, the wounds from their trip to the poison grounds were still scattered all over their bodies. The black spiders in the second door weren't poisonous, but Chu Qingge had been too nervous and made a mistake in her judgment. She'd used medicine indiscriminately and ended up with these spots. Duanmu Bei had gone to find Duanmu Yao. It was rare for the two of them to travel together. Big bro, lure that red-robed man away. I'm going to find Han Yunxi for revenge. Chu Qingge was still fuming. They hadn't left Medical City until they found out that Long Fei Yi had offered a bounty for Han Yunxi. Unfortunately, they'd run into each other in the wilderness. Actually, Chu Tianyin had suffered the heaviest injuries while protecting Chu Qingge, but he didn't complain at all, much less hold a grudge. Qingge, just pretend this never happened. Don't worry about it, alright? Chu Tianyin asked mildly. Never happened. Chu Qingge couldn't believe it. Big bro, don't tell me you've been bewitched by that woman too. What else does she know besides a bit of poison arts? Chu Tianyin knitted his brows and didn't reply. Chu Qingge grew even angrier and took out her bow to chase after him, but Chu Tianyin grabbed her bow and stopped her. Qingge, don't worry about anything related to Han Yunxi in the future. If you run into her, yield to her, understand? Why should I? Chu Qingge finally sensed that something was off. Although her big brother had a good temper, he wasn't the type to let anyone take advantage of him or bully him. These are father's orders. It's best if you don't ask any questions, Chu Tianyin added. A complicated look flickered past Chu Chinga's eyes. She was all too familiar with her big brother's words. When father had her learn poisons, he'd said the same thing. These are orders. It's best if you don't ask any questions. Chapter 288. Long Fei Ye's bounty notice stirred up all of Cloud Realm continent. Medicine City was no exception. That evening, Han Yunxi and Gu arrived at the south gates of Medicine City. They hadn't even entered the gates when they saw a crowd of people in the distance. Something big happened in Medicine City. Gu walked up curiously, only to see a huge bounty notice plastered to the wall. There was only a portrait and 2 sentences on the notice. The portrait was large and took up 2/3 of the entire notice. The woman in the picture had beautiful features and a face as delicate as a flower. Even a mere portrait couldn't hide the noble air she was born with. Gu Qishao recognized Han Yunxi as soon as he saw her. Below the portrait were 2 lines of words. The first line read, "Return quickly or face the consequences." The second line read, "Anyone who reports to the Duke of Qin's estate will be rewarded 10,000 taels of gold." Aside from that, there was no explanation as to how Han Yunxi had disappeared. There wasn't even a mention of the word "missing." The Duke of Qin's bounty for anyone looking for his Wang Fei was already a big deal. With such a tyrannical bounty notice, it was hard not to make the headlines of Cloud Realm continent. The crowd was making all sorts of guesses. Some said Han Yunxi had been kidnapped, while others said Han Yunxi had gone missing. There were even some who speculated that His Highness Duke of Qin was simply putting on a show for Emperor Tianhui. He no longer wanted this woman. Despite all the guesses, no one expected Han Yunxi to run away of her own accord. All the women in the world were racking their brains to get close to His Highness Duke of Qin. How could anyone run away of their own accord? As Gu Qishao stared and stared, his smile grew wider and wider until he almost laughed out loud. He never expected Han Yunxi to run away of her own accord one day. No wonder she wouldn't answer him when he asked her where Long Fei Yi had gone or whether he knew her whereabouts on the Long Fei Yi. Gu rubbed his chin as he admired the portrait with interest. The more he admired it, the better he felt. What to do? He really liked Poison Lass more and more. Han Yunxi, even if you've married into the Duke of Qin's household, as long as you want to leave, this young master will dare to take you away. Long Fei Ye's high-profile bounty could only mean that he hadn't found the person he was looking for. He didn't even have a clue. Gu smiled until his eyes narrowed into a line. Just as he was about to look for Han Yunxi, he turned around and saw Han Yunxi standing behind him with a white veil covering her face. In a flash, Gu's bewitching eyes turned as tender as water. Even his expression softened as he said, "Yunxi, from now on, I'll follow you to the ends of the earth. We'll never part, all right?" Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't look at him, nor did she hear what he said. She looked up at the wanted poster on the wall with an extremely serious expression. After a long time, Han Yunxi lowered her head to look at Gu. Gu's gaze was still gentle, but Han Yunxi didn't take it seriously. She only said mildly, "Still not leaving?" Gu gestured at the bounty poster and teased, 10,000 taels of gold. "I'll take you to get your reward, okay?" Han Yunxi's expression was still solemn. "All right." He wouldn't trade for it even if he gave me the entire Tianning country's treasury. Gu said confidently. Han Yunxi gave a start. Gu's words sounded so familiar. She'd heard similar words of love before, hadn't she? Reality proved that they couldn't be taken seriously. Gu purposely covered his face before entering the city with Han Yunxi. As soon as they entered the city, bounty posters could be seen everywhere. If this was the case in Medicine City, one could only imagine the other places. Long Fei Yi, this madman. Why did he want to take her back? Why did he keep using her without explaining anything? When he was in a good mood, he held her hand, but when he was in a bad mood, he bullied her. Han Yunxi would look at the bounty posters on both sides at first, but in the end, she pretended not to see them. Long Fei Yi, do you want me to have nowhere else to go? I don't believe it. It was evening when Gu and Han Yunxi settled down at the inn closest to the Mu clan. They asked for 2 rooms, one next to the other. Gu saw Han Yunxi's gloomy face the entire way and thought she'd be very unsettled. But she wasn't in a rush at all. After washing up and eating dinner, she came to ask him about the Mu clan. As for the bounty posters, she didn't mention a word. Gu wasn't a gossipy person. If Han Yunxi didn't mention it, he wouldn't ask. He was a person who only cared about the results, not the process. It was enough that Poison Lass was with him now. Everything else could go to hell. How can you be sure that Mu Axayan is my mother based on this pattern alone? Han Yunxi went straight to the point. Gu had inadvertently found the Axayan character on her medical pouch. It was exactly the same as the Axayan character on Mu Axayan's belongings. Thus, he thought of Lady Tianqin. Following this line of thought, he found out that Lady Tianqin was Mu Axayan, who had suddenly disappeared all those years ago. Gu only gave her a general idea on the way here. He didn't go into the details, saying that he'd tell her slowly when they reached Medicine City. It's the matter you asked Third Elder about. Back then, Lady Tianqin used Lady Lianqin's help to find Vice Head Lin. She skipped all the tests and directly nominated Han Kongan for the position of director. The reason Lady Lianqin helped was because Lady Tianqin was her biological sister, the 4th miss of the Mu clan, Mu Axayan. Since Gu had spoken, he had no intention of hiding anything. So that's how it was. Han Yunxi knew that she'd be able to find some clues in the medical academy. But how did this guy know when even Third Elder couldn't? After all, Lady Lianqin and Vice Head Lin had an affair. Vice Head Lin had gone easy on Han Kongan, and even Lady Tianqin's request for Lady Lianqin's help back then were all extremely private matters. How do you know? How do you know everything about the medical academy? This was the second time Han Yunxi had asked this question. There was no time when she didn't want to know Gu's background more than now. Seeing Han Yunxi's serious expression, Gu's gaze subconsciously softened. He really liked it when she looked at him so seriously. How do you know? Han Yunxi asked for the 3rd time. Gu suddenly reached out to dotingly pat her head and smiled. Poison Lass, how I know isn't important. What's important is that we need to confirm whether or not you're a descendant of the poison sect. Han Yunxi was so close to telling him the truth. She'd have told him she was. But in the end, she held herself back. In this world, aside from Gu Beiyue, who didn't ask for anything from her and always helped her in secret, who didn't come for benefits. She didn't know why Gu had come, but from the first time they'd met and he'd saved her, she knew that this family had ulterior motives. What if I really am a descendant of the poison sect? Han Yunxi asked teasingly. To her surprise, Gu, who always answered her questions, didn't reply. He smiled and rubbed her head again with a doting smile. Good girl, rest first. I'll take you to the Mu estate tonight to meet someone. Han Yunxi didn't ask any further. Her mother had already passed away, and there was no way to fake her death in childbirth. Who was Gu taking her to the Mu estate to meet? Medicine City and the medical academy had a close relationship, and the poison sect was a taboo in the medical academy. As one of the 3 great clans in Medicine City, the Mu clan wouldn't touch the medical academy's taboo no matter what. Lady Tianqin's affairs were definitely shady. Hadn't Muaxian gone missing all those years ago? Was Lady Lianxin the only one who knew of her whereabouts and that she was Lady Tianxin? Had Lady Tianxin's difficult labor been a pure accident, or was there another reason? Even though she'd found such a huge clue, Han Yunxi was still very confused about Lady Tianxin and her biological father. Seeing that Gu was about to leave, Han Yunxi hastily asked, "Where are you going?" Gu glanced back with a charming smile. "Poison lass, don't worry. Unless I die, I won't leave you behind." Unless he dies. Many years later, Han Yunxi found out everything about Gu Qishao, including his undying and indestructible body. Every time she recalled his words today, her face would fill with tears. Han Yunxi sighed softly as she watched Gu Qishao's figure disappear through the doorway. She walked to the window and saw that many of the bounty posters outside had been surrounded so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. She lowered her eyes and watched for a while before suddenly closing the window. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. She opened her medical pouch and wanted to take Lil Thing out for a chat, but who knew that Lil Thing wasn't in the pouch? After leaving the poison warehouse, she didn't know if Lil Thing had eaten its fill. Every day, she would take out many poisons from the detoxification system and put them in her medical pouch. Sometimes, Lil Thing would finish them all, and other times, it would leave them untouched. She couldn't understand Lil Thing and didn't have the time to think about it. She could only feed it and hide it. Lil Thing wasn't here, but the poisons in her medical pouch were untouched. Han Yunxi guessed that Lil Thing must have slipped out to play. Along the way, Lil Thing had disappeared many times, but it would suddenly appear every time. After tidying up, Han Yunxi went back to her room to sleep. However, she never dreamed that Lil Thing would do such a terrifying thing in the hour she was sleeping. At this moment, Lil Thing was at the entrance of the medical hall in Medicine City. That's right, it was the medicinal hall that required membership and a gold card to enter. It was the highest level medicinal hall in Medicine City, and all the goods sold there were high-end goods. When Long Fei Yi brought Han Yunxi here for the first time, he directly threw a gold card to her to squander. It was said that Han Yunxi broke the personal spending record of the medicinal hall that day. The entrance to the medicinal hall was heavily guarded. Lil Thing wanted to sneak in a few times, but unfortunately, there weren't many people coming in and out, so Lil Thing couldn't take advantage of it. Lil Thing had already eaten its fill in the poison warehouse, so it came here to look for medicinal ingredients to change its taste. Actually, Lil Thing didn't only eat poison. When it was in a bad mood, Lil Thing would eat, and eat a living person. Lil Thing couldn't eat meat during this period of time, so it could at least look for expensive medicinal ingredients to fill its stomach. This was the so-called foodie. When they were hungry, they could eat as much as they wanted, but when they weren't, they were picky. Lil Thing was like a mouse, hiding in a corner and poking its head out from time to time. It waited and waited, smelling the waves of medicinal fragrance coming from inside. Finally, Lil Thing couldn't wait any longer. Thus, Lil Thing sneaked along the wall and crawled step by step towards the door. It was only the size of a palm, who would notice it? Unfortunately. Chapter 289. Just as Lil Thing lowered its head and tiptoed towards the entrance of the medicinal herb clubhouse, there was a sudden shout. "There's a rat! There's a rat!" Fortunately, Lil Thing couldn't understand human language. Otherwise, it would have continued to crawl forward silently. The rat was clearly not referring to it. Hearing the shout, Lil Thing immediately raised its head and saw a burly man taking off his shoes and swatting at it. Lil Thing immediately dodged nimbly. At this time, the burly man saw clearly. It's not a rat, it's a squirrel. The person behind him was taking off his shoes as he responded, whether it's a squirrel or a rat, no rats are allowed to enter. Whether it was a high-class medicinal herb clubhouse or a small medicinal herb market that sold cheap goods, the two most taboo things were insects and rats. These two things were the most destructive to medicinal herbs. If they were used, it wouldn't be a big deal if some of them were eaten, but if they were sold, the price would drop and the worst would be that they couldn't be sold. Therefore, places where medicinal herbs were sold would be protected against rats and insects. No matter how the person behind him shouted, the burly man didn't make a move. Instead, he stared at Lil Thing. Lil Thing anxiously hid at the foot of the wall and was blocked by the burly man. It was also staring at the burly man. This squirrel is white and so small. It doesn't look like a cub. The burly man pointed out the difference between Lil Thing and other squirrels in one sentence. Did you see wrongly? How can a squirrel be white? The young man behind him caught up. When he saw Lil Thing, he immediately changed what he said a second ago. It really is a squirrel. Let's catch it first. The burly man signaled the young man to surround it. Thus, the two of them surrounded Lil Thing with one hand and a shoe in the other. Lil Thing's black eyes kept rolling. Suddenly, before the two guards besieged it, it directly jumped into the air. The first reaction of the two guards was to pounce on it. Unfortunately, Lil Thing's feet pushed against the wall and it actually bounced out and landed on the threshold, causing the two of them to bump into each other. Ouch! The two of them bumped into each other painfully. Seeing Lil Thing jump so fast, they were both puzzled. This little thing is quite interesting. Let's catch it first. It'll be troublesome if it runs in. The little thing was having so much fun that it forgot that it had been exposed. It squatted down on the threshold and squeaked provocatively. The burly man and the young man were shocked, but they couldn't care less. They rushed over and shouted, "Someone, there's a rat intruder. Stop it." Seeing that they were about to pounce down, the little thing jumped up again, playing with the two guards at the door until they fell into a ball. Squeak! Squeak! The little thing fell from the sky in a straight line and landed on the big man's head. It then jumped onto the young man's body and amused itself. It was very happy. It hadn't played like this for a long time. When its old master was still alive, it used to jump around like this every day. Now that the poison sect was destroyed and its old master was gone, it had finally found a new master. It could only obediently hide. It knew that many people in the world wanted it, so it couldn't harm its new master. Lil Thing was a sentimental child. Thinking up to here, it stopped hopping and sat down on the burly man's face. It tilted its head sadly. But at this time, many people in the medicine hall gathered around. They were all shocked to see Lil Thing like this. I've never seen a white squirrel before. It's so small, so cute. Is this squirrel for sale? You can sell it to me if you catch it. Amidst the discussion, Lil Thing was still immersed in the past. It didn't know that the burly man was reaching out to grab it, nor did it know that several guards had already surrounded it with rat nets and were waiting for an opportunity. Soon, the leader made a hand gesture and two large nets came down on Lil Thing's head. Squeak! Lil Thing shrieked. It wanted to escape, but it was too late. The guards pulled in the nets and tied Lil Thing up. At this moment, everyone gathered around to take a closer look at the little thing. They could see the little thing even more clearly. It's so cute. Where did it come from? There's no such breed of squirrel, right? Did someone raise one that died it? How much do you want to sell it for? Name a price. I'll buy it, I'll buy it. I'll buy it no matter how much it costs. Those who could buy medicinal herbs here were all rich people. They wouldn't even blink an eye if they spent a lot of money here. In their world, they were afraid of not having enough things to buy and not having enough money to buy. It was rare to see such a special squirrel. Everyone started to talk and soon, they started to argue. Lil Thing wasn't afraid. It was actually very easy for it to escape. It stared at the people around it with wide eyes. It couldn't understand why these people were arguing so fiercely. When the guards saw this situation, they exchanged glances. One of them said, "Everyone, quiet down. How about this? Let's compete for a price. The highest bidder gets it." Anyway, everyone worked together to catch it at the entrance. It wasn't considered something from the medicine hole. Before the warden was alerted, they should quickly scam these rich people. Lil Thing saw that everyone suddenly quieted down. Its sneaky black eyes looked around and it was puzzled. What was going on? "I'll pay 1,000 taels." Someone couldn't wait to bid. "Double." 3,000. Hee, 10,000. In just a short while, the price had reached 10,000 taels. 10,000 taels was enough to buy a very high-grade medicinal herb in the medicine hole. The crowd paused for a moment. Many of them hesitated. A few of the guards exchanged glances. Each of them was overjoyed in their hearts. 10,000 taels was something they couldn't earn in their lifetime. Even if they divided it among a few people, they would still get a lot. Not to mention buying wine, they would even have enough money to support their families. The leader couldn't wait to shout, 10,000 taels. Is there anyone else who wants to bid? Who knew that a woman would suddenly shout, 20,000 taels? 20,000 taels? For a moment, the whole place quieted down. Many people were shocked. Most of the guards were dumbfounded. 20,000 taels. Not to mention this life, they wouldn't even have to worry about it in their next life. Looking towards the source of the voice, they saw a young woman with a pretty face. She was dressed in white and carried a long thing on her back. It was wrapped in red cloth. It looked like a bow or a sword. Facing everyone's gaze, the woman in white wasn't nervous. Her face was cold and her eyes were proud. She was simply a cold beauty. Seeing that everyone was looking at the cold beauty, Lil Thing also looked over. When it saw her, its entire mouse body felt unwell. It was her. That cold beauty who wanted to shoot arrows at its master in the poisonous herb storage. It was finished. She had seen it. Would its master be angry? No, she didn't know it. Its master wouldn't know either. Thinking of this, Lil Thing felt relieved. It silently watched, not knowing what this cold beauty wanted to do. For a long time, no one bid. 20,000 taels was indeed high. Rich people weren't stupid. After all, this was just a plaything. The woman in white swept her gaze around. Seeing that no one was bidding, the guards were so excited that they couldn't speak. Since no one is bidding, I'll buy it. The woman in white took out 2 banknotes and stretched out her other hand towards the guards. At this time, Lil Thing, who had been silently watching everything, suddenly narrowed its eyes and stared at the banknotes. So it was like this. This group of people wanted to buy it. If it couldn't understand the exchange of money with one hand and goods with the other, it would have lived in vain. Lil Thing was very angry. Was it only worth 2 banknotes? Currently, the guard was handing over the rat-catching bag to Chuchinga when the angry Lil Thing jumped up without warning. It was so strong that it knocked aside both the guard and Chuchinga's hands, leaving 2 bloody scratches on Chuchinga's hand. Ah! Chuchinga cried out, caught off guard. The guard was frightened as well. In a moment of panic, he dropped the banknotes in his hands. Lil Thing jumped to the ground and tore up the 2 banknotes before jumping on top of the guard's head. Its chest heaved in anger. These people had gone too far. Instead of running away, it spat out a gold card from its mouth in front of everyone. For a moment, everyone was stunned. Even Chuchinga was so stunned that she forgot about the wound on her hand. Such a small mouth could spit out such a large gold card. Just what was Lil Thing doing? Lil Thing threatened Chuchinga with the card in its mouth as it waved its paws at her. This bad woman wanted to buy it for a mere 20,000 taels. Why didn't she take a look at the thing in its hands? This was the highest level of gold card in Cloud Realm continent. It had no limit to its limits. Supposedly, the number of people in Cloud Realm continent with such a card could be counted on one's fingers. Chuchinga looked at the torn banknotes on the ground, then at Lil Thing's provocative actions. She couldn't even breathe as her stomach filled with rage. She was in a bad mood to begin with and had come to the Medical Materials Association to spend money happily. Instead, a little beast looked down on her like this. She'd never be able to quell her anger until she killed it. You're seeking death. Her eyes flashed as she reached out a poisonous hand towards Lil Thing. But all of the guards surrounded her and blocked her way. Miss, calm your anger, calm your anger. Miss, you can't. Someone left Lil Thing behind. No matter how greedy the guards were, they didn't dare to act rashly at the sight of such a gold card. There were very few people in Cloud Realm continent with such a card, and only a handful of them had ever spent money at the Medical Materials Association. All of them were important figures they couldn't afford to offend. No matter what Lil Thing was, it must have run off on its own with its owner. If it died here, even the Medical Materials Association's boss and president would have a hard time explaining themselves. Naturally, Chuchinga recognized the gold card as well, but she was too angry to care who it belonged to. She took out 2 more banknotes to shake off the guards and said coldly, "This thing already belongs to this lady. If I want it to die, it has to die." But at this moment, a low male voice spoke up from behind her. "Miss Chu, rather than venting your anger on a squirrel, why don't you have its owner come out and apologize to you?" Chuchinga looked back and saw a refined man with an elegant bearing. It was none other than the Medical Materials Association's left manager and Medicine City's Wang clan's 3rd young master, Wang Ruochin. Others might not know who Chuchinga was, but Wang Yichen did. He'd admired her for a long time, but never had a chance to express his goodwill. Chuchinga had no interest in Wang Ruochin at all. Coldly, she said, "How do you know who its owner is?" Wang Ruochin chuckled. "The owner of the gold card is its owner. Show me the card and I'll know." The Medical Materials Association was one of the Wang clan's businesses. As its left manager, Wang Ruochin was in charge of its accounts. As long as a gold card had been used here, he could recognize its owner. This person was the 4th young master of the Wang clan, Wang Ruochin's younger brother, and the only young pharmacist in Medicine City who could rival Mu Ling, Wang Shuqin. He was the right deacon of the Herbology Association and was in charge of the Herbology warehouse. He was a low-key person who rarely showed his face, but he was the most famous young master of the Wang family. It was said that the matchmakers who came to propose marriage could line up from the Wang family's main gate all the way to Medicine City's main gate. Naturally, Chuchinga recognized Wang Shuqin, but she wasn't planning to give him any face. Coldly, she said, "What are you waiting for? Can you catch it?" Wang Shuqin walked out from behind the crowd, a modest gentleman with an elegant demeanor. Why does Miss Chu haggle over every ounce with a mere rat? What did they mean by cursing without using vulgarities? This was it. Chuchinga was so angry that her face turned green. Without warning, she shot an arrow at Lil Thing. Fortunately, Lil Thing was focused on guarding against her and immediately dodged out of the way. It was so fast that no one saw it until it landed on Wang Shuchen's shoulder. Of all the people present, Lil Thing only had a good impression of Wang Shuchen. Get out of the way, or else you'll be responsible for your own life. Chu Qingge aimed her bow at him again. Seeing this, Wang Ruochen grew anxious, but Wang Shuchen didn't take it to heart. He carefully tilted his head towards Lil Thing and revealed a smile. The little thing inadvertently raised her head and bumped into his smile. It was so warm. Although this man wasn't as gentle as the white-robed gentleman it liked the most, he was as warm as the winter sun. It was hard to look away from him. Based on its 200 years of experience, Lil Thing could tell that this gentleman was a good person. It immediately rubbed its little head against Wang Shuchen's shoulder to show its goodwill. Seeing this, Wang Shuchen was secretly alarmed. This little squirrel is too intelligent. It knows that I'll protect it. If not for the gold card, the crowd would have assumed that this little squirrel was Wang Shuchen's pet. Although Chu Qingge readied her bow, she didn't make a move. After all, she was facing Medicine City's Wang clan. Even Western Zhou's imperial clan had to give them some face, much less her Chu clan. In the end, she couldn't cause trouble for a large clan because of her personal grudges. Angrily, she asked, Wang Shuchen, your guards took my banknotes. What, does the Medical Materials Association have no trust in their servants? Wang Shuchen knew that it was the guards' fault. If he wanted to resolve the matter, he'd have to invite the little squirrel's owner out. Seeing the little squirrel so friendly, he carefully reached out a hand to take the gold card. Unexpectedly, the little squirrel didn't reject him. If Lil Thing recognized a good person, then he was a good person. It had never been wrong before. It figured that the white-robed gentleman must be here to uphold justice for it. Thus, it happily opened its mouth and gave the gold card to Wang Shuchen. Now the crowd was secretly amazed. Someone even asked directly, Fourth young master, this squirrel couldn't be yours, right? Wang Shuchen shook his head as he examined the gold card. Cloud Realm Continent's universal gold cards all had a unique symbol on them that symbolized the cardholder's identity. This was especially true for limitless gold cards like these, which were even more obvious. Wang Shuchen took a closer look and immediately raised his head, his face full of shock. Seeing this, Wang Ruochen quickly asked, whose is it? Everyone else looked over as well. Chu Qingge waited with interest. In any case, she wasn't in the wrong. No matter whose card it was, she'd fight to the death. Wang Shuchen didn't speak, but handed the gold card to Wang Ruochen. Wang Ruochen was more familiar with the card than Wang Shuchen, so he blurted out, Tianning's Duke of Qin. Tianning's Duke of Qin. The gold card belonged to Tianning's Qin Wang, so the little squirrel was Tianning's Duke of Qin's pet. Everyone fell silent as they exchanged glances, secretly rejoicing that they weren't the ones who'd stirred up trouble. Tianning's Duke of Qin wasn't someone ordinary people could afford to provoke. Chu Qingge gave a start, unable to believe her ears. She asked again, Wang Ruochen, who did you say the gold card belonged to? Wang Ruochen's expression was complicated as he replied word by word, Long Fei Yi. Chu Qingge heard everything clearly. She stood rooted to the spot and didn't speak. Wang Ruochen quickly handed the gold card back to Wang Shuchen. If it was anyone else, he might have bragged and played the hero. But since it was Long Fei Yi, he could only resentfully give up. Long Fei Yi was a difficult person to deal with to begin with. Moreover, he had a personal relationship with their father, the head of the Wang clan. The wisest thing to do now was to settle the little squirrel down and put away the gold card, then find a way to tell Long Fei Yi. If the little squirrel could run all the way here, then Long Fei Yi must be nearby as well. Seeing the gold card return to Wang Shuchen's hands and the serious looks on everyone's faces, Lil Thing was lost. Had something big happened? Ignoring Chu Chinga, Wang Shuchen turned to leave with the little squirrel, but Chu Chinga blocked his way. Cold, she said, I've already bought this squirrel. Even if it belongs to Long Fei Yi, this lady still wants it. Quite a few people sucked in a cold breath at her words. What a bold tone. Miss Chu, this is my Medical Materials Association's fault. We're willing to compensate you tenfold for your losses, so please forgive us, Wang Shuchen said seriously. It really is your Medical Materials Association's fault. Chapter 291. Deep into the night, the entire Medicine City was bathed in a hazy moonlight. Everything was extremely quiet. Gu led Han Yunxi all the way to the Mu estate. Han Yunxi had a deep impression of the Mu clan the first time she came to Medicine City, but she had never seen what they looked like. She couldn't help but ponder a question. The Mu clan had colluded with Jun Yixia to plant a new type of poisonous plant in the herb forest's poisonous pond. What was their goal? With the Mu clan's current strength in Medicine City and its numerous talented juniors, there was no need for them to ask a tiger for its skin and hook up with Jun Yixia. Medical City and Medicine City were originally one family. Medical City support greatly affected the three great clans' status in Medicine City. If Medical City were to find out that the Mu clan had colluded with the 100 Poison sect, then the Mu clan would undoubtedly be asking for trouble. Hey, do you know about the Mu clan and Jun Yixia colluding? Han Yunxi asked in a low voice. Unexpectedly, Gu only answered with a casual "MHM." This guy really did know about it. Are you very familiar with the Mu clan? Han Yunxi asked again. She recalled how he had tricked her and Long Fei Yi into coming to Medicine City to find the herbal tea sapling. He had also lied that the sapling was with the Mu clan, but it was actually with the Xia clan. Gu chuckled, not at all. I only know Mu Ling her. Han Yunxi instantly understood. This evildoer had undoubtedly tricked that ignorant girl Mu Ling her. If he hadn't used Mu Ling her, then how would Gu have found out about the Mu clan secrets? Although he still had a debt to settle with Mu Ling her, Han Yunxi still despised Gu's behavior of deceiving a young girl's heart. She didn't ask any more questions and only shot him a disdainful look. Unexpectedly, not only did Gu not mind, he even earnestly said to her, when I find that girl, I'll immediately avenge you. You can whip her or cut her to pieces as you wish. Han Yunxi chuckled and didn't say anything else. She thought that there was no need for her to look for Mu Linger to take revenge for that push. As long as she threw Gu's words at her, that girl would cry for the rest of her life. How pathetic. Very soon, Gu Qishao brought Han Yunxi through the Mu estate's back courtyard, avoiding multiple layers of guards before finally leading her into a small, dark forest. Han Yunxi couldn't help but ask, have you been here many times? Mu Ling has brought me here many times. If it wasn't for her, I really wouldn't have known that there was such a place hidden in the backyard of the Mu family. Gu answered truthfully. The small forest was so dark that one couldn't even see one's own fingers. Outside the small forest, however, there was a completely different world. It was actually a not small lake, and a bamboo house was built on top of the lake. There were no lights in the bamboo house, so it was impossible to see if there was anyone inside with the help of the moonlight. Gu and Han Yunxi landed on the balcony of the bamboo house together. This is Mu Xian's residence. There are things that she left behind when she was alive inside. Gu explained. Upon hearing this, Han Yunxi picked up a match and couldn't wait to go inside. However, at this moment, Han Yunxi sensed a poison approaching from behind. She was about to turn around when the sound of a hand drum suddenly came from behind her. Han Yunxi felt her hair stand on end when she heard this sound in the dark. However, when she turned around, she was immediately shocked. Unknowingly, an old woman had appeared behind him. She was short and had a serious face. Her small eyes were shining with a sharp light, which was even more obvious in the dark night. She was holding a small hand drum in her hand, which she kept shaking. Han Yunxi immediately sensed the old woman's hostility. However, Gu said, "She's deaf and mute. She can't hear or speak." Han Yunxi was slightly shocked. Only then did she understand why the old woman's eyes were so bright. She couldn't hear, so she could only use her eyes to make up for it. She activated the detoxification system and carefully scanned the old woman. She only found that the old woman was poisoned, but she couldn't determine what kind of poison it was. This situation could only mean that the poison in the old woman's body wasn't simple and wasn't easy to cure. Han Yunxi didn't care about it for the time being. She asked in a low voice, She has been guarding here for many years. Mu Ling has said that this old woman has been guarding here since she was a child. She doesn't know who she is either. Gu answered truthfully. In the beginning, this mute old woman was full of hostility towards him. However, after coming here with Mu Ling many times, mute old woman became familiar with him. Mute old woman was illiterate and didn't understand sign language. She couldn't communicate at all. When Mu Ling discovered this place at the age of 7, mute old woman beat her up. Later, that girl secretly sent her food every day. Only then did she get close to mute old woman. Unfortunately, after so many years, Mu Ling still couldn't communicate with mute old woman. Is this the person you want to bring me to see? Han Yunxi asked, puzzled. Gu was about to explain when mute old woman suddenly stretched out her hand and pointed at Han Yunxi. She shook the wooden drum violently, as if to ask who Han Yunxi was. Gu smiled and pointed at Han Yunxi's medical pouch. Mute old woman finally noticed the medical pouch and was shocked. Mute old woman was so excited that she threw the wooden drum on the ground and rushed towards Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi was frightened and instinctively retreated. However, mute old woman was too fast. As soon as she caught up, mute old woman grabbed hold of Han Yunxi's medical pouch and yanked it down. What are you doing? Han Yunxi quickly grabbed hold of mute old woman's pouch, but she didn't expect mute old woman's grip to be so strong. Han Yunxi was about to snatch the medical pouch when she saw that mute old woman didn't rummage through her things. Instead, she held the medical pouch and gently stroked the embroidered Xian character. Soon, tears began to roll down her face. Seeing this, Han Yunxi didn't know whether to move forward or retreat. She just stood there. She couldn't bear to see old people cry. Han Yunxi glanced at Gu. Gu shrugged, indicating that he had no choice but to wait. After a long time, mute old woman finally wiped away her tears and raised her head to look at Han Yunxi. However, this time, there wasn't a trace of hostility in her eyes. Instead, it was filled with deep affection. When she met such a gaze, Han Yunxi was slightly startled. She felt that she couldn't bear it. Such a gaze made Han Yunxi let her guard down. She even softened her voice. Granny, this belongs to my mother. Do you recognize it? Only then did Han Yunxi realize that mute Granny couldn't hear her. Can I take a look inside the house? Han Yunxi gestured towards the house. Mute old woman seemed to understand and quickly went into the house to light the lamp. Han Yunxi and Gu walked in and saw that everything in the bamboo house was neat and tidy. There wasn't even a speck of dust. However, other than the large pieces of furniture, there wasn't much else. The things that Mu Axian left behind are in the inner room. Go in and take a look. As soon as Gu finished speaking, mute old woman took out a pouch from the inner room and handed it to Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi opened the pouch. It was nothing more than a handkerchief, a purse, and other small things. However, without exception, there was a Xian character embroidered on all of them. It was exactly the same as the one on her medical pouch. Mute old woman deftly unfolded all the small things. Then, she took the medical pouch and compared them to Han Yunxi. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to talk to Han Yunxi. Unfortunately, she couldn't even make a sound. Seeing her like this, Han Yunxi was puzzled. In general, deafness and muteness were caused by deafness. In other words, because of deafness, the person couldn't hear and couldn't learn to speak or communicate. It wasn't that they couldn't make a sound. Mute old woman couldn't even make a sound. She obviously wasn't a normal deafness and muteness. When she recalled the traces of poison in her body, Han Yunxi blurted out, she was poisoned into a mute. Gu Qishao immediately snapped his fingers. Smart. What's the matter? Han Yunxi asked seriously. Not only was she poisoned, but she was also poison deaf. It's just that I can't find out what kind of poison it is. If you can cure her, maybe she'll tell you everything about Muaxin. This was the real reason why Gu had brought Han Yunxi here. Gu couldn't find out what kind of poison it was. No wonder her detoxification system couldn't confirm it. This was a tricky problem. Gu was right. If she wanted to know everything about Muaxin, who mute old woman was, and why she was guarding Muaxin's belongings, the only way was to cure mute old woman. Mute old woman looked at Gu and then at Han Yunxi. She couldn't hear what they were saying. She seemed to be in a hurry. She stuffed Muaxin's belongings and medical pouch into Han Yunxi's hands and waved her hand, indicating that she should leave. Han Yunxi wanted to leave. After all, it wasn't safe here. She packed up her belongings and extended her hand to mute old woman, indicating that she wanted to take her away. However, mute old woman didn't leave. Instead, she went into the inner room. Han Yunxi and the others followed. As soon as they entered, Han Yunxi saw a portrait. The woman in the portrait was dressed as a doctor. She carried a cloth bag that was similar to her medical pouch. The woman was very young. Her facial features were delicate and pretty. She couldn't be called a beauty. However, the smile on her face was bright and sweet. She gave people an indescribable feeling of kindness and beauty. Perhaps it was the blood flowing in her veins, or perhaps she was really infected by the smile. Looking at the woman's smiling face, Han Yunxi felt that the whole world was beautiful. She noticed the signature next to the portrait. The woman was none other than Muaxin, but the signature of the person was unknown. Could it be her father? Granny, can you take the portrait with you? Han Yunxi said. She wanted to take the portrait, but mute old woman stopped her. She shook her head. She only knew that mute old woman didn't allow her to take the portrait. Granny, I'll take you away. I'll help you detoxify. Han Yunxi patiently gestured, but even if she understood sign language, mute old woman couldn't understand her. Han Yunxi even tried to drag mute old woman away, but she refused to budge. She clung to the pillar for dear life. In the end, Han Yunxi pulled mute old woman to sit down on one side and activated the detoxification system. Since mute old woman wasn't leaving, she'd do a thorough examination first. Perhaps she'd be able to detoxify the poison right here and now. While Han Yunxi was hiding in the Mu estate to detoxify herself, Long Feiyi had already arrived at the Wang Estate's Medical Materials Association with astonishing speed. Wang Shuchen was originally planning to arrange for Chu Qingge to stay at an inn. Even if Long Feiyi was in Medical City, it'd take him at least a day to get here. Who knew that Long Feiyi would show up before the sun even rose? Currently, Lil Thing hadn't left yet. It was still eating by the medicine cabinet. Wang Shuchen and Wang Ruochen didn't take Long Feiyi to see Chu Qingge, but brought him to see the little squirrel first. Your Highness, this pet of yours is quite interesting. It doesn't look very big, but its appetite is astonishing. Long Fei had long asked about the situation before coming here. He had never liked small animals, so he'd never raised a pet. All he knew was that he'd given Han Yunxi that gold card. He didn't even take off his cloak as he hurried into the association, his body covered in dust. His handsome face was as cold as ice. His body blocked the little thing's line of sight, so unfortunately, it did not see Long Fei. In fact, Lil Thing had always been very vigilant. Even if it didn't see anything, it could smell that the surrounding aura was different. However, it had long determined that it was safe here. The only one who dared to approach it was Wang Shuqin. Letting Wang Shuqin carry it, the little thing's white fur all fell down. It grinned at him meekly. After eating and drinking to its heart's content, it was in a good mood. Wang Shuqin took the gold card and originally wanted to put the little thing back. However, after hesitating, he still held it in his hand. He turned around and handed the gold card and the little thing to Long Fei. "Your Highness," unexpectedly, before Wang Shuqin could finish speaking, the little thing suddenly squeaked. The white fur that had just fallen down was like a reverse flow of dominoes. In an instant, each strand of fur stood up again. It was as if its fur was standing on end. Heavens! Who did it see? It was stunned. Wang Ruochen and Wang Shuqin were both shocked by the little thing's squeak. The squeaks they heard before were cheerful and proud, but this squeak was as tragic as a pig being slaughtered. Long Fei glanced at the gold card before accepting it. He was certain that this was the card he'd given to Han Yunxi. Coldly, he sized up Lil Thing, but didn't reach out to grab it. He found it too dirty. But Lil Thing assumed that Long Fei was going to grab it. It suddenly broke free from Wang Shuqin's grasp and fled far, far away. It didn't even dare to look back. If Lil Thing was here, then Han Yunxi had to be nearby. Long Fei was going to order his guards to secretly search the area, but as soon as he saw Lil Thing run away, he chased after it without a word. Wang Ruochen and Wang Shuqin exchanged glances, unsure of what to do. Chu Qingge sighed. Wang Ruochen was vexed. Chu Qingge wasn't easy to deal with. Wang Shuqin thought it over before sighing. Let her wait for now. Chu Qingge would definitely wait for Long Fei, but whether or not Long Fei would return was a mystery. Seeing Long Fei chase after it, Lil Thing was scared out of its wits. Could it be that the gold card didn't belong to its master, but him? Had he found out that it had spent too much? It didn't know why it was so afraid of this guy, but it only had one thought in its mind: hurry back to its master's embrace to hide. Lil Thing ran out of the Medical Materials Association and towards the inn. Long Fei was hot on its heels. He followed Lil Thing, sometimes jumping up and down, sometimes flying forward. His wide black cloak fluttered behind him, accentuating his long and refined physique. He was as agile as a cheetah, sharp and domineering. Just watching him run was a pleasure. Lil Thing could have run even faster, but it was too full. It was very, very afraid. What if Long Fei caught up to it? What would it do? The pursuer behind them was too aggressive. However, Long Fei wasn't using all his strength to chase after it. He purposely kept his distance. If he caught Lil Thing too early, who would take him to that woman? Soon enough, Long Fei reached the inn where Han Yunxi and Gu were staying. As soon as Lil Thing entered the room, it sensed that something was wrong. Its master had left. Long Fei followed it to the window and scanned the room with cold eyes. Immediately, he ordered his guard, "Go ask if anyone's traveling with her." Those traveling with her would definitely stay in the room next door. With Han Yunxi's skills, she must have had someone helping her. That was how she'd been able to evade his pursuit and silently hide in Medicine City. Lil Thing didn't stay in the room for long. When it saw Long Fei Yi blocking the window, it broke through the door and ran out, sniffing for air as it ran. Soon enough, it found its master's scent and changed directions to chase after her. Long Fei Yi maintained a certain distance from Lil Thing. His expression grew colder and colder. Han Yunshi, Medicine City is filled with bounties. How dare you hide when you see them? Han Yunshi had no idea that a storm was approaching. At this time, she and Gu were still in the bamboo house in the Mu estate's backyard. After Han Yunshi gave Mute Granny a very detailed examination, her elegant face no longer had a smile. Mute Granny's vocal cords and cochlea were originally normal. Her current deafness and muteness were the result of poison. Her vocal cords had become cysts due to the poison, affecting her ability to speak. Moreover, they were still swelling. Her cochlea, on the other hand, had been in a state of inflammation due to the poison. Parts of it had even begun to fester, affecting her hearing. In a few more years, Mute Granny would not only be deaf and mute, but she would also be tormented by inflammation and pain every day. Who was it that did this to her? Gu felt uneasy when he saw Han Yunshi's expression. How is it? Can you deal with it? It's broomcorn millet poison. She's been poisoned for too long. It's very difficult to treat, Han Yunshi replied. The detox system had an antidote recipe, but it didn't have the necessary ingredients. Moreover, the 3 ingredients required were extremely rare. Han Yunshi had never seen them in her life. Even if they could find the antidote and cure the poison, Han Yunshi couldn't guarantee that Mute Granny would recover. After all, she'd been poisoned for too long. Broomcorn millet poison. Gu rubbed his chin thoughtfully. This was the first time he'd heard of this poison. Let's take her away first. It'll take some time to cure the poison, Han Yunshi said seriously. She wanted to take down the portrait on the wall again, but Mute Granny kept shaking her head. She didn't want to leave this place. Mute Granny pushed Han Yunshi and Gu out the door with all her might, especially Han Yunshi. She was so agitated that she wanted her to leave as soon as possible. Mu Axian was having an affair with a descendant of the poison sect. This wasn't something the Mu clan could tolerate. The Mu clan should have destroyed all evidence, so why did they leave Mute Granny here to guard Mu Axian's old residence? Han Yunshi wasn't stupid. She could tell that Mute Granny had her reasons for insisting on staying here. However, she had to cure Mute Granny first if she wanted to know the answer. Thus, Mute Granny had to leave. After all, this wasn't a place to stay for long. Han Yunshi shot Gu a look, and Gu immediately understood what she meant. He walked over to Mute Granny and struck her with a palm, knocking her unconscious. Then, he lifted her over his shoulder. Although this devilish man was more beautiful than a woman, he was definitely the type to hide his strength. Han Yunshi gave him a thumbs up when she saw how strong his arm was. Then, she nimbly took down the portrait and packed it up. Let's go. Gu smiled. Poison lass, this young master can carry you as well. Han Yunshi put on a fake smile. Are we going or not? Where are we going? Gu actually wanted to ask. Let's go back to the inn first. I need a quiet place to expel the poison, Han Yunshi said seriously. Since she couldn't find an antidote for the time being, she needed to expel the poison from Mute Granny's body first to minimize the damage. Gu nodded and wrapped an arm around Han Yunshi's shoulder. However, as soon as they stepped out of the door, a group of black-robed assassins flew in from all directions and surrounded the bamboo tower. The leader of the group landed in front of Han Yunshi and the others. He was short, with a pointy mouth and monkey-like cheeks. One look and anyone could tell that he was a meticulous ghost. Han Yunshi had seen this man before in the medicine forest. He was in cahoots with Jun Xia. He was the head of the Mu clan, Muing Dong. Han Yunxi never expected this old man to be so well hidden. He actually knew martial arts. After waiting for so long, I didn't expect Qin Wangfei to show up. What a surprise! Muing Dong said in a strange tone. Previously in the medicine forest, Han Yunxi had been wearing a mask so Muing Dong hadn't seen her face. Now, after the Long Fei Ye's bounty notice, everyone remembered Han Yunxi's face. Hearing Muing Dong's words, Gu narrowed his eyes and revealed a murderous intent. Without a doubt, Muing Dong had been lying in ambush here for a long time. Gu, you've fallen into a trap, Han Yunxi said coldly. Chapter 293. Regardless of whether Mu Ling had betrayed Gu, or whether Mu Ling had been used by Muing Dong had been lying in ambush here for a long time. Qin Wangfei, what's your relationship with Mu Axian? Muing Dong got straight to the point. If Gu hadn't pointed it out, he and Mute Granny wouldn't have noticed the Axian character embroidered on Han Yunxi's medical pouch. Han Yunxi was very glad that they hadn't talked about Lady Tianxin. Coldly, she said, "It's none of your business." Muing Dong's face immediately darkened at her words. Han Yunxi, this isn't Tianing. Don't be so shameless. Are you even a man to act so viciously against a weak old woman? Han Yunxi's face was full of disdain. No matter who Mute Granny was, it looked like she'd been used by Muing Dong. Muing Dong had set up this bamboo house to wait for someone to walk right into his trap. Unfortunately, Gu had brought her here. You want to take her away? Even you have to stay behind. As Muing Dong spoke, he suddenly sent a kick flying towards Han Yunxi. At the same time, the surrounding assassins all moved to surround Gu. Han Yunxi pushed Gu's hand aside. Protect Granny well. Although she didn't know martial arts, she'd experienced a few fights and was quite skilled at dodging. She dodged to the side to avoid Muing Dong's kick, then made a shooting pose with both hands and shot out hidden weapons. Muing Dong never expected Han Yunxi to have such a move. Fortunately, he reacted quickly, or else he really would have been hit by a needle. Insignificant skill. He snorted as he drew his sword. What, didn't Jun Yixia tell you that this Wang Fei isn't to be trifled with when you colluded with him? Han Yunxi said coldly. Muing Dong was stunned. How did Han Yunxi know about this? However, Han Yunxi took this opportunity to shoot out several hidden weapons. At the same time, she stomped her foot and several poisonous needles flew out from under her feet. Muing Dong dodged again and again. A golden needle brushed past his arm and almost hit him. Han Yunxi was vexed and anxious. She was about to use the needle again when Muing Dong's figure flashed and landed behind her. Han Yunxi hurriedly turned around and immediately shot the needle. This time, Muing Dong dodged it very easily. It seems that Qin Wangfei only knows these few moves. His lips curled into a mocking smile. An old fox like him had already figured out Han Yunxi's abilities after just a few moves. This woman looked arrogant, but in fact, she did not know martial arts. She only knew how to use hidden weapons. Han Yunxi knew that she had been exposed, but she still did not give up attacking. However, after a few rounds, she was out of breath, but Muing Dong was still at ease. At the side, Gu was worried about Han Yunxi. However, it was difficult for him to be distracted while carrying an unconscious Mute Granny and dealing with dozens of assassins. Soon, Muing Dong began his counterattack. Qin Wangfei, no matter what relationship you have with Mu Axian, since you're here, you can forget about leaving. As Muing Dong spoke, he suddenly clawed at Han Yunxi's shoulder. Gu saw this from the corner of his eye and used his fan of blades to attack. He had protected Han Yunxi, but Mute Granny had been snatched away by the assassins. He made a prompt decision and pulled Han Yunshi into his arms. Let's go. Gu could actually kill all the assassins, including Muing Dong. However, this would mean exposing his secret. In this life, if he could, he would never expose his secret. This group of people had already set up an ambush. They had no choice but to leave. Seeing Mute Granny thrown aside by the assassins, Han Yunshi's heart ached. She did not want to leave like this. If she left this time, it would not be easy to see Mute Granny again. She was about to struggle free of Gu Chishao's hand and fight again when another group of black-robed assassins appeared to surround them. Seeing this, Gu and Han Yunshi were shocked. Even if Han Yunshi wanted to escape now, it was too late. Qin Wangfei, I said before that you must stay today. Muing Dong was determined to make her stay. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a cold voice suddenly came from the periphery of the assassins. Muing Dong, what makes you think you can make my woman stay? As soon as the voice fell, the assassins in the periphery were suddenly sent flying, blood splattering everywhere. Long Fei had one hand behind his back while the other held his sword. Step by step, his sword rose and fell with each step. None of the black-robed assassins in his way were lucky enough to escape. All of them were sent flying by his sword on and fell to the ground as corpses. In an instant, the surrounding assassins all took the initiative to move aside, opening a path for Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi. Muing Dong was shocked. Wasn't he still offering a bounty for Han Yunshi? How did he find this place? Long Fei Yi ignored Muing Dong. His cold gaze was fixed on Han Yunshi, who was in Gu's arms. His long sword dragged on the ground as he walked step by step towards Han Yunshi. His entire body emitted a monstrous anger. His rage was so intense that it made Gu Qishao on guard. Meanwhile, Han Yunshi was completely dumbfounded as her entire body stiffened. Muing Dong recovered his senses and immediately ordered, "Men, attack together. Send more people." The black-robed assassins immediately surged forward again, but Long Fei was still walking towards Han Yunshi step by step. Anyone who blocked his path was killed with a single stroke of his sword, without mercy. The assassins in black fell one after another. There were only deaths, no injuries. Soon, the place where Long Fei Yi walked past was filled with corpses. In the end, the assassins unconsciously retreated again, distancing themselves from this death god. Muing Dong was also stunned. He had long heard of Long Fei Yi's name and knew that this cold prince was not to be trifled with. But today, he finally understood why the arrogant Jun Yixia would list Long Fei Yi as a dangerous person. In fact, Han Yunshi secretly thought of countless scenarios where Long Fei Yi would find her, but she never thought that this man would step over corpses to walk towards her. Gu did not retreat, but hugged Han Yunshi even tighter. It was as if he was holding a treasure, afraid that he would lose it if he wasn't careful. Finally, Long Fei Yi arrived in front of them. He was only 3 steps away. Gu still smiled. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, long time no see." Long Fei Yi did not reply. His gaze swept over Gu's hand that was wrapped around Han Yunshi's shoulder. He suddenly raised his leg and kicked. This kick was as fast as lightning, accurately landing on Gu's chest and sending him flying. Gu Qishao spat out a mouthful of fresh blood before falling into the icy waters of the lake, causing a wave to form. Even so, Long Fei Yi still did not look at him. His attention was completely focused on Han Yunshi. More accurately, his cold gaze was fixed on Han Yunshi's eyes, as if he wanted to see through her. "Do you want to come over yourself, or do you want this prince to do it?" His voice was low and cold, causing the surrounding atmosphere to drop several degrees. Han Yunshi heard it. The surrounding assassins and Muing Dong also heard it. For a moment, no one dared to move. Many people even broke out in a cold sweat for Han Yunxi. This woman must have escaped. It was unimaginable what the consequences would be if this man personally did it. Han Yunxi tightly bit her lip and did not say a word. Still not coming over? Long Fei Yi asked patiently. Unexpectedly, not only did Han Yunxi not come over, but she also retreated several steps, wanting to escape. Finally, Long Fei lost his patience and strode forward to grab her by the chin. His strength was fierce enough to startle everyone present. At this time, Goose suddenly flew out of the water and sternly said, Long Fei Yi, if you dare to hurt her in the slightest, this young master will definitely not let you off. But who knew that Long Fei Yi would suddenly kiss Han Yunxi's lips? Like a violent storm, it was as if he was venting, but also as if he was punishing her. It was fierce and intense. No one expected it to turn out like this. How was this a physical attack? This was a verbal attack. Han Yunxi forgot to struggle. When she regained her senses, she was already unable to struggle. She used all her strength to slap him. Unfortunately, her hands were quickly bound by Long Fei Ye's hands. Gu Qishao didn't move as he watched from a distance. His fingers slowly clenched into fists. He was this close to throwing caution to the wind and exposing his identity to fight Long Fei to the death. He could not bear to see Poison Lass being bullied, especially being bullied like this. But in the end, he still did not do it. He turned his head away and did not look anymore. He turned around and flew away as fast as he could. Han Yunxi, it is destined that I can only joke and say that I love you. Seeing Gu leave, Muing Dong finally regained his senses. He could not imagine that Long Fei Yi would actually be intimate with Han Yunxi in this kind of situation. He did not care so much. This was the best opportunity to attack. He immediately signaled to the head of the assassins with his eyes. Soon, dozens of assassins surrounded them and attacked. However, Long Fei Yi still did not let go of Han Yunxi. He held Han Yunxi's waist with one hand and held a sword with the other. He was actually kissing her while defending against the enemy. In the midst of the battle, blood splattered everywhere. His kiss continued to deepen. It went from intense and fierce to reluctant to part. It was as if he was afraid of losing her, so he did not dare to let go. No one knew that these days, under his anger, there was a hidden fear. In this life, even when Mu Fei left, he had never been so afraid. In the midst of the battle, Han Yunxi had already closed her eyes. She could escape from this man's palm, but she could not escape his kiss. She could not struggle and gave up struggling. She was paralyzed in his arms. Although she was afraid of him, at the same time, she had a sense of security. She knew that she had lost again. In the end, corpses were lying everywhere. The assassins did not dare to step forward. This man was too terrifying. Muing Dong hesitated. He wanted to do it himself several times, but in the end, he did not take a step forward. He clenched his fists tightly. Looking at the two people who were still kissing, he was full of vexation. What was this called? She actually came here to be intimate with him, and he was helpless against it. The head of the assassins looked at Muing Dong questioningly. Should he continue to send reinforcements or should he follow them? Muing Dong did not know how to answer. This was the Mu family. Did he want him to retreat? However, if he did not retreat, he would not be able to defeat them. Finally, Han Yunxi could not breathe. Long Fei Yi reluctantly let go of her. The two people looked at each other. Long Fei Ye's eyes were still cold. Han Yunxi's face was red and avoided his gaze. Long Fei Yi did not say anything. Under everyone's gaze, he buried his head again. Continue. Chapter 294. Continue. He was so domineering in front of so many people. Han Yunxi had just breathed in some fresh air when she was quickly overwhelmed by a certain domineering man's scent. He had come too suddenly, and so had this kiss. She couldn't think, her mind completely blank. Although this second kiss wasn't as fierce as the first, it didn't weaken in the slightest. It was still intense, passionate, and constantly deepened, as if it couldn't get enough. Long Fei Yi held his sword in one hand, and the sword fell to the ground. His other hand was wrapped around Han Yunxi's waist. His left hand was filled with killing intent, and his right hand was filled with a domineering kiss. Surrounded by assassins, this posture was simply too handsome. But Mu Yingdong couldn't stand it anymore. Long Fei Yi was simply too much. Not only did he trespass into his Mu residence, but he also dared to use this method to look down on his Mu residence's defensive capabilities. If this wasn't a humiliation, then what was? Someone come, call all the guards over. If His Highness Duke of Qin wants to be intimate here, then old man will let him be intimate to his heart's content. Mu Yingdong's loud roar was heard by everyone present, including Long Fei Yi. But Long Fei Yi was still focused on continuing that kiss. Unknowingly, the more he kissed, the gentler he became, and the more he kissed, the more he couldn't let go. In short, he didn't have time to pay attention to Mu Yingdong. Soon, a large group of guards was called over, surrounding the bamboo building so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. A group of archers lined up at the front, all of them with their bows fully drawn, waiting for Mu Yingdong's orders. Faced with Long Fei Yi's indifference, Mu Yingdong was about to go crazy. He had seen arrogant people before, but he had never seen someone as arrogant as Long Fei Yi. Someone come, aim at Han Yunxi. Mu Yingdong wasn't stupid. He could see Long Fei Yi's weakness. He wasn't threatening Long Fei Yi, but he really wanted to kill him. He narrowed his shrewd eyes and raised his hand, about to give the order to shoot. However, at this moment, Long Fei Yi let go of Han Yunxi. As soon as her lips were released, Han Yunxi's small face was sullen. Just as she was about to speak, Long Fei Yi's big hand immediately held the back of her head and pulled her into his arms to protect her. His cold gaze swept over the surrounding archers, and he looked at Mu Yingdong. Mu Yingdong was inexplicably afraid, but he didn't admit it. He'd weathered countless storms in his life. As the head of the Mu clan, was he afraid of a mere Duke of Tianning? He didn't believe it. Men, give me. Before he could finish, Long Fei Yi forcefully interrupted him. Mu Yingdong, if you dare to shoot an arrow tonight, this prince will reward your daughter with 10 arrows. As soon as these words came out, Mu Yingdong was suddenly frightened and couldn't speak for a long time. His raised hand froze in mid-air, he didn't dare to put it down. His daughter. Who else could Long Fei Yi be referring to besides Mu Ling? She was the daughter Mu Yingdong cared about the most, the Mu clan's genius pharmacist, their hope, and their biggest bargaining chip to dominate Medicine City. During their trip to Medical City, he'd intended for Ling to show off her talents and build up connections, but she'd suddenly disappeared midway. Even now, he still hadn't found her. Because of this, he hadn't slept for 5 whole days. Long Fei Yi, my Mu clan has no enmity with you. What do you mean by kidnapping my daughter? Mu Yingdong asked angrily. If he hadn't bumped into Han Yunxi tonight, he really wouldn't have had much to do with the Duke of Qin's estate. As for the grudges between Jun Yixie and Long Fei Yi, that was Jun Yixie's own business. No enmity. Mu Ling almost took this prince's wife's life. You call that no enmity? Long Fei Yi coldly snorted. Han Yunxi buried her head in his chest. Only now did she realize that this guy knew about what happened in the sky pit that day. So Mu Ling had been detained by him. Did he want to avenge her? Then what about Duan Miao? Han Yunxi had been conflicted too many times. This time, she chose to remain silent. She allowed him to hold her as she leaned against his sturdy chest and calmly listened to his powerful heartbeat. Ling wouldn't hurt anyone. She doesn't know Han Yunxi, so don't slander her, Muing Dong said with certainty. Muing Dong said with certainty. He knew Ling Er's temperament the best. Although she was a bit willful sometimes, she was kind-hearted. How could she hurt someone for no reason? It's up to you to believe it or not. Long Fei Yi was very busy and didn't have time to waste words here. He glanced at the unconscious mute granny out of the corner of his eye and asked Han Yunxi in a low voice, "You want to take her away?" "Yes," Han Yunxi murmured. "All right." Long Fei's voice was low and magnetic. It wasn't as cold as when he spoke to Muing Dong, but gave off the impression of a considerate man who'd grant any request. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't notice. Her eyes were hooded as she thought about something. "Chu Shifeng, take her away," Long Fei Yi ordered. With Chu Shifeng in the lead, a group of guards flew over from all directions. Reality proved that Long Fei Yi had come prepared. He'd chased Lil Thing all the way here and spotted Han Yunxi and Gu. Immediately, he sensed an ambush around them. He immediately told Chu Shifeng to send more men over. As for where Lil Thing had run off to, he was no longer interested. Muing Dong didn't dare to make any rash moves because of Muling Now that Long Fei Ye's guards were on the move, he was even more afraid to make a move. He felt stifled in his chest. How stifling. "Long Fei Yi, you can take her away. You can leave too, but please hand over Ling Har." Muing Dong's tone had clearly softened. "Your lordship didn't come to make a deal with you." Long Fei Yi refused to budge an inch. With a cold glare, Chu Shifeng strode towards mute granny. It wasn't that Long Fei Yi was unreasonable, but that this was a world where the strong preyed on the weak. If you were weak, then others would be stronger. Muing Dong wanted to stop Long Fei Yi, but he didn't have the strength. "Long Fei Yi, just what will it take for you to release Ling Er?" Long Fei Yi gave a soft snort before turning to leave with Han Yunxi. At the same time, Chu Shifeng took mute granny away with him. Muing Dong chased after him a few steps before shouting, "Long Fei Yi, if you dare to touch a hair on Ling Er's head, my Mu clan won't let this go." Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi didn't even look back. Muing Dong was both angry and anxious. He clenched his fists and paced back and forth. No matter what, even if he had to beg, he had to save Ling Er. He thought back and forth before his gaze rested on the door of the bamboo hut. "Mu Axian. Han Yunxi," he muttered to himself. After the assassins dispersed, Muing Dong left as well. Nobody noticed a red figure chasing after Long Fei Ye's group. After Long Fei Yi took her away from the Mu estate, Han Yunxi stopped keeping silent and began to struggle fiercely. "Gu was the one who took you out of Medicine City?" he asked cold. "You let go. I've already returned the perplexing butterfly illusion to you. I made it clear a long time ago that we have nothing to do with each other. I don't owe you a thing." Han Yunxi's voice grew even colder. Whenever Gu was brought up, her temper was even worse than Long Fei Ye's. Back at the inn, he'd said flirtatiously that he'd never leave her behind unless he died. It had only been a few hours, but he'd left just like that. As expected, his words could only be taken as a joke. "Long Fei Yi, I married you first because of the imperial decree and second to protect my little life. I don't owe you anything. If you mind the name Qin Wangfei, I promise I'll change my name and disappear from Tianing country forever. Just pretend Qin Wangfei is dead." Han Yunxi stared Long Fei Yi straight in the eyes, each and every word clear. Long Fei Yi held her tightly by the waist and didn't respond for a long time. His entire being had turned exceptionally quiet. His silence was enough to make Han Yunxi break down. She couldn't afford to offend him, but couldn't she avoid him? Just what did this guy want? Did he want her to be a soulless captive? She couldn't do that. Let go. Long Fei Yi, I hate you. What do you take me for? Do you think you can bully me whenever you want? Long Fei Yi was still silent. Han Yunxi was furious and suddenly shot out 3 needles, pressing them against Long Fei Yi's neck. Let go, or else you'll have to bear the consequences, she warned. But Long Fei Yi not only didn't let go, he didn't say a word either. He landed on the roof and looked at her silently. Han Yunxi gripped the needles tightly. She was so close to stabbing them in, but in the end, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Long Fei Yi, I'd have to be crazy to endure your silence. Han Yunxi threw away the needles and laughed coldly. Your kiss is so cheap. Han Yunxi, I promised the head of Tianshan Kenzo, my master, that I would protect Duanmu Yao until she turned 18, Long Fei Yi suddenly explained. It was so sudden and unexpected. Han Yunxi's heart skipped a beat and almost stopped. What did this guy just say? Did he explain why he wanted to save Duanmu Yao? She'd been obsessed with this question for so long, and he'd just explained it like that. Before Han Yunxi could recover, Long Fei Yi continued, last time, when we killed the poisonous python, and the time in the sinkhole, he seemed to be stuttering, but also seemed to be thinking as he spoke. In any case, His Highness Duke of Qin, who had always been a man of few words, stuttered as he spoke. I only wanted to protect her from death, that's all, nothing else. I didn't expect you to be pushed out of the sinkhole. His master's protection included many, many things. In reality, he'd already gone against his master's orders and only wanted to protect Duanmu Yao from death. Han Yunxi had never heard Long Fei Yi speak like this before. She'd also never seen Long Fei Yi's gaze so gentle and sincere. After all, this guy had just been merciless and ruthless in the Mu estate. So, was he trying to explain to her and give her an explanation? So, he knew how much she cared about Duanmu Yao. He even remembered that time when they killed the poisonous python. So, he'd always known how she felt. Han Yunxi's heart softened as she looked into Long Fei Yi's gentle eyes. She had to admit that she was a coward and had no backbone. Looking at Long Fei Yi like this, all the knots in her heart were untied. Her anger dissipated, and she forgot about her grudge. Spring had come and the flowers had bloomed. Are you giving me an explanation? Han Yunxi asked, even though she already knew the answer. Long Fei Yi seemed a bit uncomfortable and avoided her gaze. Hey, isn't that right? Han Yunxi was one to reach for a yard after being given an inch. Her clear eyes stared straight at him. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.